Chapter 1 Awakening Master Toxic Revival. Uzumaki Naruto, a young blonde-haired, blue-eyed boy of 6 years old, was walking to his first day of school at the Konoha Ninja Academy. Naruto was wearing his new ninja outfit given to him by his Jiji, also known as the Sandaime Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi. His awesome ninja clothes, as he called them, consisted of a short-sleeved mesh undershirt, a dark burnt orange long-sleeved overshirt, black ninja pants with a kunai holster strapped to his right thigh, and dark blue ninja sandals. Along with several of the same outfit, Hiruzen had also given Naruto a belt that had several small storage pouches sewn into it to carry various ninja tools and supplies. As Naruto ran around him, Hiruzen couldn't help but smile fondly at the child's antics. And then I'm going to be the best in taijutsu and ninjutsu and weapons and all the other awesome ninja things, Jiji, Naruto exclaimed as he ran a few feet ahead of the Hokage. I'm sure you will be, Naruto. I'm sure you will be. Hiruzen chuckled as the boy had been proclaiming such things since he'd picked him up from his apartment that morning. Now you may be wondering why such a young child was living on his own at the tender age of 6. You see, on the night Naruto was born, the Kyuubi no Yuko, the greatest of the Bijou, suddenly attacked Konohagakure without warning. It appeared so suddenly that no proper defense could be raised and no ways to defeat it could be found. As the ninja of Konoha raced to defend their home against the beast, the Yondaime Hokage, Namikaze Minato, was welcoming his newborn son into the world. Sadly for the proud father, his wife, Uzumaki Namikaze Kushina, hadn't been able to survive the birthing of her son, with the malicious chakra and unending killing intent of the Kyuubi pressing down on all of Konoha. With no other alternative left, the Yondaime resorted to his only solution. He sealed the beast into his own son at the cost of his life. Mere hours after he had been born, Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto had been left alone in this world. The Yondaime's final wish was for the whole of Konohagakure to view his son as the hero that kept them safe from the beast. However, human emotions often get the better of people, and this case was no exception. Once the newly reinstated Sandaime Hokage had revealed Naruto's status as the beast's living prison, the villagers, with their losses and undirected anger, chose baby Naruto as the target of their rage. So great was the villagers' outcry that the Sandaime passed a law stating that any person who spoke of Naruto's burden to anyone who did not already know would be executed for treason against Konoha. So it came to be that Naruto, the only child of the Yondaime Hokage, was raised alone and secluded by Sarutobi's most trusted maternal caregivers. The boy grew up being cared for by both retired and active kunoichi and shinobi. So it came as no small surprise to Hiruzen that the boy had wanted to join the village's military shinobi force. So the Hokage had enrolled the boy, despite some protests from the civilian representatives on the council and a small number of his own shinobi force, into the academy when Naruto had reached the age of 6. As they both walked towards the academy, the Hokage took notice of the glares of the villagers directed towards Naruto. It's been 6 years now. Even though the villagers have calmed themselves and tried to move past that horrible night, many still can't see the boy as more than the Kyuubi. Hiruzen thought sadly as he looked upon the happy, smiling form of his surrogate grandson. Hey, Jiji, we're here. We're here," came Naruto's joyous exclamation. The Hokage looked up from his musings and smiled at the young blonde. "Indeed we are, Naruto," the Sandaime replied with a grin. As the Hokage escorted Naruto to his class, he noted the looks the boy was receiving from both parents and the teachers. He mused. It looks like most of the teachers understand the boy's situation. Sadly, the parents don't seem to want their children to interact with the boy. Naruto, as happy as he was, wasn't oblivious to the glares and cold looks he was receiving from the villagers. It's always the same, he thought. They all look at me like I did something wrong to them. Naruto's thoughts were cut short when the Hokage ushered him into a classroom. Upon entering, the blonde saw various children his age sitting in several rows of seats. He noticed that several were from what his Jiji called Konoha's ninja clans, while most were civilian children who wanted to try their hand at being in the shinobi forces. "Now, Naruto," said the Hokage, "I want you to study hard and listen to your sensei, all right?" Naruto vigorously nodded his head while replying, "Sure thing, Jiji. I'll learn everything sensei teaches me, and I'll be the best ninja ever." With a smile on his face, and after playfully tussling the blonde's hair, the Hokage left Naruto to find a seat as the sensei began to quiet the class down in preparation for roll call. After finishing the roll call, the sensei introduced himself. "Hello, students. My name is Irika, and this is my assistant Mizuki," said Irika as he pointed to Mizuki. "We will be your sensei for the duration of your time here at the academy." Naruto instantly took to Irika's kind tone and calm composure. However, he felt something was a bit off with Mizuki. Something just didn't seem right about the man. Especially when he saw Mizuki glare at him with those cold eyes he saw the villagers give him. Note to self, thought Naruto, watch out for Mizuki sensei. Something isn't right about him. Time skip end of the first semester. At the end of the first semester, the first-year student rankings were posted in the lobby of the academy for all to see. To Naruto's great joy, he was ranked a bit above the middle of the class. Yes, Naruto exclaimed in his mind. All that extra studying is paying off. Wait till I tell Gigi about this. With that thought in his mind, Naruto took off toward the Hokage Tower in the center of the village. As he arrived, he saw the Umbu guarding the doors. The two Umbu gave him a respectful bow as one opened the door for him. To this day, Naruto still couldn't figure out why his Gigi's masked ninja, as Naruto called them, were so kind and courteous to him, but he thanked them both anyway as he made his way into the tower. Upon arriving at the Hokage's office door, Naruto asked the secretary if he could see the old man. After the secretary checked with the Hokage through the intercom and telling him it was okay, Naruto rushed into the office, but not before the secretary told him how cute she thought he was and her giving him a few sweets to have later. "Hey Gigi," Naruto yelled as he jumped in front of the Hokage's desk. "You'll never guess where I was ranked on the first-year students list." Naruto was practically bouncing where he stood from excitement. "Oh, and where was that, Naruto?" The Hokage asked kindly, even though he had received said rankings the day before. "I'm in the top of the middle tier of students," Naruto shouted as he grinned broadly. My, Naruto," said the Hokage fondly. "That's quite an achievement." Naruto, if possible, smiled even brighter at the praise. "Just you wait, Gigi." Naruto laughed. "Soon enough I'll be at the top of the whole school, and then I'll be a ninja just like you." Sarutobi chuckled at his surrogate grandson's energetic proclamation. "I have no doubt that you will be someday, Naruto. But how about we celebrate with some ramen now?" he asked the young blonde, who nodded happily as he led the Hokage out of his office and towards Ichiraku Ramen. Time skip end of the first year. "Uzumaki, Uzumaki, Uzumaki." Naruto repeated to himself as his eyes scrolled down the first-year student's final ranking list on the bulletin board. Here it is," he exclaimed as he found his name. "Awesome. I'm in the middle of the upper tier," he thought proudly as he saw his name directly below someone named Aburame Shino. Naruto made his way to Ichiraku with a grin on his face for his accomplishment. After gorging himself with as much ramen as he could eat, he went home to his apartment to get some rest. On his way home, he began to think about what Irika had told them of the various fields of the ninja force. Irika had explained that each field usually had an expertise in a given art of the ninja profession and that they should all begin thinking about what kind of ninja they wanted to be when they graduated. "Well, obviously, I want to be the best ninja ever," thought Naruto as he recalled that particular lecture. In his now 7-year-old mind, that was all there was to being a ninja. Though I have to admit what the textbooks say about poisons is really cool. Naruto mused. I mean, come on. You could barely touch a bad guy with some of those poisons and he'd drop to the ground unconscious or worse in less than a minute. These kinds of thoughts spurred Naruto's imagination and filled his dreams that night with him using his awesome ninja poisons to defeat bad guys and rescue princesses and daimyos. Time skip the next day. On Naruto's first day of summer break, he immediately set off for the library in hopes of finding out more about his newly chosen weapon of choice, poisons. When he asked the Chunin that watched over the shinobi part of the library about any books on the subject, he got a strange look before the Chunin pointed him to a small section that contained the information Naruto sought. After checking out a few of the books, he immediately set off for home to begin learning all he could about the subject that had caught his fascination. "Oh wow," Naruto exclaimed. He had just finished the first chapter of the first book, and already he was completely awestruck by the power poisons could contain. "I can't believe more ninja don't use poisons," Naruto said with a sigh. "You can do so much with them, from capture to interrogation, to outright killing. Naruto was so enamored with the versatility of poisons that he resolved to learn all he could, and by the end of summer break, he would beg Gigi to teach him at least one of the, admittedly few, poison jutsu the book had mentioned. Time skip end of summer break. After 2 months' worth of intense studying, Naruto had finished all of the library's books on poisons and had learned how to use the non-lethal ones the books gave instructions on creating. Naruto was rather surprised that his outside hobby for gardening could be used to grow various types of plants that, when mixed correctly, produced mild poisons that could cause anything from mild aches to near total paralysis. The hardest thing he had done was getting the Hokage to teach him one of the poison jutsu the books had listed. But after explaining to Naruto that the jutsu wasn't to be used unless supervised or as a last resort, the Hokage had caved and taught Naruto the Dokujiri no Jutsu. 1. Naruto now used the belt pouches the Sandaime had given him to carry various poisons and antidotes, as well as a new weapon the books had stated did well with poisons, Sanban. Now Naruto was making his way to the first day of his second year at the academy. He noticed the glares the villagers still sent his way, but ignored them. One day they'll respect me, Naruto thought. When I'm Hokage, they'll show me the respect they showed Gigi. After getting situated in his seat at the academy, and after roll had been called, Irika took them all outside with Mizuki following behind the students. "All right, class," Irika said in his teacher voice. "Since it's the first day back, we would like to see what all the students have trained in and learned since we last saw you." Once most of the class had shown Irika and Mizuki what they had done over their summer break, Naruto was called up to show what he had done over the summer. "Actually, Iruka-sensei, if you could, can you get everyone to step back a bit?" Naruto asked. Irika raised an eyebrow at Naruto's request, but did as asked and had all the students move back. "Perfect, now I can show everybody my new jutsu," Naruto thought happily. "All right, everybody watch this," Naruto exclaimed before starting a few hand seals and inhaling deeply. "Dokujiri no Jutsu," Naruto half shouted as he exhaled a large cloud of thick purple mist at a group of training dummies. After the mist had cleared, everyone saw the result of Naruto's jutsu. The training dummies that had stood there before were made of a light brown wood. After Naruto's jutsu, however, all 3 of them were a light purple color where the poisonous mist had stuck to the surface of the dummies. "Naruto," Irika called, stunned. "Do you realize that you just preformed a brank ninjutsu technique?" he asked the now grinning blonde. "Of course, Iruka-sensei," Naruto laughed. "It was the only one I could get down over the summer." After getting over his shock, Irika told everyone to return to class while he washed the poison on the dummies away so that they could be used again without poisoning anyone. On the way back to class, all of the students were talking about Naruto's new technique. A boy Naruto knew as Inuzuka Kiba actually congratulated Naruto on knowing a badass jutsu before they were all ushered into their seats. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to Naruto, a certain shy Hyuga girl in the back row was blushing and looking admirably at him as she poked her fingers together and mumbled out a Naruto-kun, before turning her attention to Irika, who had just walked back into the classroom to start their lessons for the day. Time skip end of second year. After Naruto's impressive display on the first day, many of the students and teachers had started regarding the boy as a student with amazing potential. Irika was incredibly proud that several of his students were being regarded as the best the academy had to offer. After dismissing the students for the last time this year, Irika pondered on how much they would all have improved come the beginning of next year. Naruto, however, was completely oblivious to this as he was going over various poisons and the processes used to create them in his head. The now 8-year-old boy was unknowingly becoming the most knowledgeable non-ninja poison user in all of High no Kuni. As it was, though, Naruto had just gotten to his apartment and quickly went to his small garden in his spare room. "All right, now what do I need for Tsuraikusa 2 poison?" Naruto asked himself as he checked his book for the ingredients while browsing through his small garden. Time skips several weeks later. Uzumaki Naruto was seen running in a full sprint towards the Hokage Tower on a normal enough summer afternoon. To anyone that knew the boy, which was a very small number of people, you could tell that he was both excited about something and incredibly confused. Upon reaching the tower, the Umbu stopped the boy at the door to ask him what was wrong. "Why are you in such a hurry, Uzumaki-san?" The Umbu on the right with the monkey mask asked. "I've got to show Gigi something," Naruto practically yelled as he continued bouncing in front of the two Umbu. What is it you need to show Hokage-sama? Uzumaki-san? Did something happen? Questioned the other Umbu, this one with a bird mask. Yes, Naruto shouted. Something did happen. Look at this. With that, the boy focused his chakra into his hands, and to both Umbu members' surprise, a dark purple and green-colored mist like chakra began to seep from the boy's hands. Torai, can you handle things here while I escort Uzumaki-san to Hokage-sama? The monkey-masked Umbu asked his partner. I'll take care of it, Saru. Get Uzumaki-san to Hokage-sama. The bird-masked Umbu replied. After being led to the Hokage's office and being let in, the monkey-masked Umbu returned to his post while Naruto showed his new discovery to his Gigi. Once Naruto had shown what he could do, only one word escaped Sarutobi's mouth in shock. Dokushu. 3. He breathed out. What? Naruto asked the Hokage in confusion. Naruto, my boy, what you've done was thought to be impossible nowadays. The last user of the Dokushu bloodline died almost 50 years ago. The Hokage answered as he continued to stare at Naruto's chakra-covered hands. Hey, Gigi, does this mean I have a Kekkei Genkai thing, like the ones Iruka Sensei taught us about? Naruto questioned as he let the chakra in his hands disperse. Yes, Naruto, you do. Your Kekkei Genkai was thought to be extinct for decades now. To see it come back after all these years is truly remarkable, the Hokage said as he stood up to get a scroll off one of the shelves in his office. After finding the one he was looking for, the old Hokage returned to his desk and unrolled the scroll for Naruto to see. Now, Naruto, your bloodline limit is called Dokushu. It allows the one who carries it to not only become immune to poisons of all types, but to also turn their very chakra and even their own body into poison. Sarutobi explained as Naruto looked at the scroll that documented his newly discovered bloodline. You mean I can turn into a poison mist or a puddle of liquid poison? Naruto asked as he looked up in confusion. Not quite, Naruto. You see, a Dokushu user's body can constantly produce various poisons from the pores of their skin when they apply chakra to their body. Anyone who comes into physical contact with said user will be poisoned on contact. With training, the Dokushu user can control what kind of poison their body releases at any given time in battle. The Hokage explained as he handed the scroll to Naruto. Inside that scroll is a list of the known Dokushu techniques. They are rightfully yours now, as you are the only known carrier of the bloodline, the Hokage said as he looked at the boy's shocked face. Gigi, Naruto questioned, does this mean I can find out who my family was? The old Hokage sighed before speaking again. I'm afraid not, my boy. The last Dokushu user died in the first attack on Yuzuno Kuni by Iwa and Kumo in the start of the Third Ninja War. That was almost 50 years ago now. All I can say is that you must be his descendant from either your mother or father. As Naruto left the tower and headed to his apartment for the night, he had only a single thought running through his head. I will master my new bloodline, he thought. I'll make all of my ancestors proud that I'm carrying on their Kekkei Genkai, he mentally shouted as he headed off to bed. Time skip academy graduation. Uzumaki Naruto was sitting in his usual seat in class as he waited to take the Chunin exam. Since the discovery of his bloodline, he had worked even harder in the academy and had climbed all the way up into the top 10 students of his year. The teachers called him a gifted, hard-working student and told other students to try and emulate his school behavior. Only a few students didn't look up to Naruto as an example of a good future shinobi. One such person was Uchiha Sasuke. After his brother Itachi had committed the genocide of the Uchiha clan, he had become antisocial and looked down on others as weak and as dead weight in his goal to become stronger and take revenge on his brother. This, however, didn't affect any of Sasuke's numerous fangirls from fawning all over him constantly. Two of the worst about it were Haruno Sakura and Yamanaka Ino. Naruto had long since realized that both had the potential to be good kunoichi if they'd stop hanging all over Sasuke and actually trained. But it wasn't his problem. If they wanted to waste time begging Sasuke for dates, let them. He wouldn't be surprised when they came back traumatized from a mission. Uzumaki Naruto. Iruka called out as he held the door to the testing room open. Well, time to pass. Naruto mumbled as he made his way down the stairs. As he passed Sasuke, he heard the boy whisper, "Try not to fail, dope." Naruto knew Sasuke felt threatened by Naruto's ranking in the class being so close to his own, and that Sasuke took every chance he could to belittle Naruto for it. Careful, Uchiha. Naruto whispered back. It'd be a shame if had to send you to the hospital for massive poison damage to your organs. With that said, Naruto walked into the next room to begin his test, while Sasuke brooded in his seat at Naruto's remark. Alright, Naruto, we'll need you to perform the Henge no Jutsu, 4, the Kawarami no Jutsu, 5, and the Bunshin no Jutsu, 6, in order to pass and graduate this year. Iruka said kindly as he got ready to mark Naruto's scores. No problem, Iruka-sensei, replied Naruto as he quickly substituted himself with one of the empty chairs in the room. Very good, Naruto. Iruka praised as he gave Naruto a passing grade on the jutsu. Shortly after Naruto transformed into the Sandame, much too said old man's enjoyment as he watched the boy's test through his viewing orb. Perfect, Naruto, Iruka remarked as he marked another passing grade on the boy's test. Naruto then did 7 hand seals and shouted, Doka Bunshin no Jutsu. 7. In a puff of white smoke there stood 11 Narutos, including the original. Very, very good, Naruto. I take it these are some of your bloodline clones, right? Iruka asked as he observed the movements of the clones. Got it in one, sensei. Naruto replied as he dismissed his clones, causing them to disperse into thick clouds of purple ninja smoke. Congratulations, Naruto, you more than qualify to graduate. Iruka said as he tossed Naruto a black, clothed headband with the standard metal plate with the Konoha insignia on it. Thank you very much, Iruka-sensei. Naruto replied as he caught the headband and tied it securely to his forehead. Walking back into the room wearing his new headband, Naruto smirked at Sasuke's brooding face before going back to his seat. Awesome, Naruto, Kiba said as he slapped Naruto on the back. You passed. Naruto smiled back at Kiba before replying. Was there any doubt? In the back sat Hyuga Hinata, and as she stared at Naruto with a heavy blush on her face, she thought, I'm so happy Naruto-kun passed. Meanwhile, Naruto was looking forward to Iruka, who had just re-entered the classroom. Congratulations to all of you who passed the exams, Iruka said as he looked at all the students. Now you will all need to report back here tomorrow for team placements. Iruka called out to the class before dismissing them for the day. After the last student had left, Iruka used Shunshin no Jutsu to get to the Hokage's office so he could deliver the list of students who passed to the Sandame, so that the Hokage could group them into 3-man teams. After leaving the academy for the day and heading home to check on his little garden of plants, Naruto was just staring out of his window thinking about whose team he could be placed on tomorrow. As long as I'm not with that arrogant bastard Sasuke, I guess I could learn to work with just about anyone. Naruto mused as he continued staring out of his window. Suddenly, Naruto noticed a suspicious figure jumping from roof to roof with a large scroll strapped to their back. Well, that doesn't seem normal, Naruto thought before grabbing his gear and trying to stealthily follow the figure. After several minutes, the figure dropped down into a clearing in the woods. Naruto carefully looked on from behind a tree as the figure removes their mask, revealing themselves as Mizuki. Now that I've got the forbidden scroll, I can finally leave this village and gain my reward from Orochimaru-sama, he said as he readjusted the scroll on his back while preparing to leap back into the trees. So that is his plan, huh? Well, if he thinks he can get away with betraying the village and trying to steal jutsu, he has another thing coming, Naruto thought as he threw 5 senbon coated with a numbing poison that would rob a limb of all movement within 2 minutes. Mizuki, sensing the weapons coming, rolled to the side, avoiding 4 of the 5 senbon. The last one, however, was embedded about an inch into his left arm, just below the shoulder. Damn it, Mizuki cursed as he pulled the senbon out of his shoulder. Who the hell did that? Show yourself, damn it, he yelled into the surrounding forest. Shinobi Lesson 1, said a hidden voice in the trees. Never reveal your presence if you don't have to. Suddenly, Mizuki had to dodge another salvo of senbon. Mizuki quickly guessed where the weapons had come from and jumped into Naruto's hiding spot and knocked the boy out of the tree and to the ground below. Well, if it isn't the demon brat, he said with a sneer. Ow, damn, that hurt, Naruto said as he looked up at Mizuki. Why are you calling me that anyway? Naruto asked as he prepared for Mizuki's next move. Oh, that's right. No one is allowed to tell you, are they? Mizuki said as he looked down at the boy. Tell me what? Naruto asked as he wondered what Mizuki was talking about. That you're the Kyuubi no Yuko, Mizuki yelled at him with his face twisted by rage. What the hell are you talking about? Naruto questioned as he listened to what the traitor had to say. The Yondaime couldn't kill the Kyuubi the night it attacked the village. So he did the next best thing. He sealed it away into a child. That child was you, Naruto. You are the Kyuubi reborn. Mizuki yelled as he charged towards the boy, intent on punching the boy in the face for the sunbon he had been hit with earlier. Naruto was shocked. He had the Kyuubi inside him? Was it true? Why hadn't he been told? Was he really a demon like some of the villagers had claimed? Before he could think any more, Mizuki's fist impacted his left cheek, and he was sent sprawling to the forest floor. How was that demon boy? Mizuki asked as he smiled maliciously at the boy lying on the ground. I'd say that was the second mistake you've made in this fight, Mizuki. Naruto replied as he picked himself up off the ground. What are you babbling about, demon? Mizuki questioned as he looked at the now standing form of Naruto. Your first mistake was getting hit by my Senbon. Naruto explained as he looked into Mizuki's eyes. You can't even feel your left arm anymore, can you? He asked. To Mizuki's shocked horror, he found that he couldn't move his left arm at all. What did you do to me, you monster? He yelled at the now grinning Naruto. Oh, just a dose of a certain poison that I coated my Senbon with, he said as he stood there with a grin on his face. Your second mistake was punching me. Naruto lectured as he pointed to Mizuki's right fist. Mizuki looked to his own hand and saw it was covered in a thin layer of a sticky green liquid. What is this stuff, you demon brat? Mizuki yelled at Naruto, who was now slowly waking towards him. Oh, that. Naruto replied innocently. That's a highly potent neurotoxin that seeps through the skin and sets off all the pain-receptive nerves it encounters. He explained nonchalantly as he took another couple of steps forward. In fact, it should start working right about now. Naruto said, only to be interrupted as Mizuki began screaming himself hoarse. You bastard. You demon brat. Mizuki tried to speak, but couldn't stop the pain that was now spreading up his right arm. Your third and final mistake, Mizuki, was underestimating me. Naruto yelled as he slammed his right hand with all 5 fingers in a claw position into Mizuki's chest hard enough to actually bury the tips of his fingers in Mizuki's skin. As Mizuki laid on the ground trying to cough and scream at the same time, Naruto stood over him and told him one last thing. Before you go into shock and pass out, you traitorous piece of shit, let me tell you one more little tidbit of information. I can turn my own chakra into a poison. With that poison, I can attack or even destroy my opponent's chakra circulatory system. Unfortunately for you, I think Gigi's interrogators will want to have a few words with you about your actions here tonight. So I just crippled your chakra network with my poison. After tonight, you'll never again be able to mold chakra. Your life as a ninja is now over, Mizuki. Reflect on your mistakes and pray for a swift end. With those last words, Mizuki succumbed to shock and passed out on the forest floor. Moments later, 4 Umbu and the Hokage landed in the clearing and surrounded Mizuki. We saw everything, Naruto. The Hokage stated as Naruto knelt before him. You did well to prevent Mizuki from taking the Forbidden Scroll. My Umbu will take him to the interrogation headquarters where they'll extract the information from him that we need. After he said that, the 4 Umbu, carefully avoiding Mizuki's poison-coated right hand, took the traitor away in a swirl of leaves. Now, Naruto, go home and get some rest. I'll explain everything to you tomorrow morning before you go to the academy to meet your team, the Hokage said before he too disappeared in a swirl of leaves. I'll be sure to do that, Hokage-sama, Naruto said before heading home for a good night's sleep. Chapter 2: Explanations and Specialized Teams. Naruto awoke the next day 2 hours before he had to be at the academy for team placements. After taking his morning shower and eating a breakfast of eggs and toast, Naruto brushed his teeth before leaving his apartment and heading for the Hokage Tower. Time for Gigi to explain what Mizuki was yelling about last night, he muttered as he arrived in front of the tower. After being led into the tower and making his way up to the Hokage's office, Naruto greeted the secretary with a small tired smile. She smiled back at him warmly before allowing him into the office. Naruto, good to see you, my boy, Sarutobi said as he looked at the young genin that was now sitting before him. He looks like he hasn't slept well since last night, Sarutobi thought as he studied Naruto's tired face from across his desk. What would you like to ask first, Naruto? Sarutobi asked as he filled his pipe with tobacco and lit it with a small application of fire-nature chakra. What I want to know the most, Gigi, is what Mizuki said true. Am I really the Kyuubi? Were the villagers right about me being a demon? Naruto asked evenly as he sighed out tiredly. Of course not, Naruto. The Kyuubi was sealed inside of you, not the other way around. Just as a prisoner is not the prison he sits in, the Kyuubi is not you who he is sealed in. The Hokage explained as he exhaled smoke from his mouth. Naruto visibly relaxed as he slumped down in the chair he was seated in. Thank goodness. He sighed as he smiled at the Hokage with his tired features. Don't let what he said bother you, Naruto. You are the hero that keeps the Kyuubi at bay. Without you, we would all have been destroyed that night 12 years ago. Sarutobi spoke kindly as he smiled at the boy he viewed as a grandson. Thanks, Gigi. I needed to hear that from someone I could trust. Naruto sighed as he stood up from his chair. Well, I need to be heading to the academy now. With your permission, Hokage, he asked with a bow. Dismissed, my boy. No need to be so formal. Sarutobi replied with a chuckle as Naruto walked out of his office. Oh, and if you've put me with Sasuke team or that shrieking fangirl bitch Sakura, I'll have to come back here and have some words with you, Gigi. Naruto said as he stuck his head back in his Sarutobi's office before closing the door and heading to the academy. Oh, don't worry, Naruto. I'm sure you'll enjoy the team I've set up for you. The Hokage thought with a smile as he returned to his work. Meanwhile, Naruto was just arriving at the academy when he suddenly sneezed. Someone must be talking about me. He mumbled as he entered his classroom. Once he entered the classroom, Naruto's ears were assaulted by the sounds of all the students waiting to receive their teams and begin their ninja careers. Sheesh, for future ninja you'd think they'd know when to be quiet, he thought irritably as he took a seat that was still available. Shortly after he sat down, the one person Naruto never wanted to sit beside took the seat next to him. Why are you sitting beside me, Sasuke? Naruto questioned the Uchiha boy while glancing at him. Shut up, Dobe. It's the last seat available that isn't being swarmed by those loser kunoichi who flocked to my Uchiha superiority. Sasuke replied as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. What a pompous dumbass, Naruto thought as he rolled his eyes at Sasuke's statement. Suddenly, everyone in the class heard what sounded like two elephants charging through the academy hallways. And here comes the terrible twosome, he thought as he looked towards the door to see both Ino and Sakura trying to shove their way through the door to the classroom. Once both had made it into the room, they stood there panting before they began shouting at each other. I want forehead. Ino yelled at Sakura, who responded with, No way, Inapig. My foot crossed the door first. Shortly after, they both noticed the object of their affections was already seated and both rushed to greet him. Good morning, Sasuke-kun. They both chorused as they smiled at the raven-haired boy. HN was the only reply they got from said boy as he didn't even turn to look at them. Narutabaka, screeched Sakura, move out of that seat so I can sit next to Sasuke-kun. Naruto simply looked at her with a bored expression before replying. What are you going to do about tea if I don't, Haruno? He questioned her before his gaze turned steely and he began to stare the girl down. I'll beat you out of it. She stuttered out as she raised her shaking fist. Oh, really? Naruto replied with a raised eyebrow. Why don't you try it then? Try it and see where you end up. Sakura hesitated for a second before sending her fist at Naruto's head. Before she knew what was happening, Sakura found herself slammed onto the floor and staring up at the ceiling. Naruto hadn't even moved from his chair and was currently holding Sakura by the wrist of the arm she tried to hit him with. Now what did you learn? Naruto questioned her in a bored tone. Ino stood there stunned. Naruto had just put Sakura on the ground with one hand. While sitting down, she quickly rushed towards the back rows and took a seat next to Shikamaru, who was currently dozing. I'm waiting, Haruno. Naruto spoke again as he increased the pressure on Sakura's wrist. I'm sorry, she shouted as the pain was too much for her. Not quite what I was expecting you to learn, but it'll do for now, Naruto replied as he let go of her wrist and pulled her to her feet. Next time, try being polite when you want something. Sakura nodded as she quickly went to sit next to Ino in the back of the room. When did the Dobe get this strong? Sasuke wondered as he watched Naruto deal with Sakura. I should have that strength. I need it more than he does. I'm an Avenger, damn it. Before Sasuke could question Naruto, Iruka walked into the room with a clipboard in hand and told the class to settle down. Now I'll read off your team assignments. Wait for your name to be called and listen for your team number, Iruka stated as he started going through the list. After waiting about 10 minutes, the first notable name caught Naruto's attention. Team 7 will be Uchiha Sasuke, Haruno Sakura, and Sai, Iruka announced, much to the dismay of Sasuke's fan club. Except Sakura, who screeched loudly about how true love conquers all. Your sensei will be Hitaki Kakashi. Iruka finished as he read off the next team. Team 8 will be Aburame Shino, Inazuka Kiba, and Hyuga Hinata. Iruka said as he flipped the page to the next team. I'm not on Naruto's team. Hinata thought sadly as she looked forlornly at the boy she had a crush on. Team 10 will be Yamanaka Ino, Akimichi Chuji, and Nara Shikamaru. Iruka read off as he flipped to the last page of his clipboard. Your sensei is Sarutobi Asuma. Lastly, Iruka called out, Uzumaki Naruto, you've been taken as an apprentice by Mitarashi Anko. Well now, this just got interesting. Naruto thought with a wide grin on his face. What? Sasuke yelled as he stood up, so fast his chair toppled over. Why does the dobe get an apprenticeship when I, an Uchiha, am stuck on a deadweight team? He yelled as he glared at Naruto. Abruptly, a large black cloth ball smashed through the room's windows before unfurling with a kunai stuck in each corner, pinning it to the floor and wall. In front of the newly revealed banner was a purple-haired woman that was wearing a fishnet bodysuit that ended at her thighs, an orange mini skirt, a long tan trench coat, with shin guards over her legs. Behind her, the banner read, The Great Mitarashi Inkasama arrives, in bright red kanji. Which one of you brats is Uzumaki Naruto? Anko questioned as she looked around the room. Anko, you're early again, Iruka said as he scratched the back of his head nervously. Well, regardless, which one of you is Naruto? She asked as she scanned the room again. That would be me, Mitarashi Naruto spoke as he raised his hand. So you're my new apprentice, brat? She asked as they locked eyes. I guess so, he replied with a smile. I demand to know why you're taking the dobe as an apprentice and not me? Sasuke shouted at Anko, breaking her from her staring match against Naruto. Because I only train the strongest of the strong. Anko replied dismissively. And, in all honesty, you just don't cut it, Uchiha. You wouldn't be able to survive my training. Naruto laughed out loud from beside Sasuke, while Sasuke himself clenched his fists tightly. Let's go, brat. Anko yelled as she jumped back out of the window and started towards the training grounds. Yes, sensei. Naruto replied before jumping over his desk and out the window in 2 leaps. Damn him, Sasuke mentally shouted as he brooded about Naruto getting what he, and Uchiha, should have received. Naruto caught up with his new sensei before she even got outside the academy grounds. Where to, sensei? He asked as they began roof-hopping away from the academy. Straight to training ground 44, of course. Anko replied with a devious smirk on her face as she picked up the pace to challenge Naruto's speed. Straight to the forest of death, huh? Naruto thought with a grin. I think I'm in love already. He mumbled playfully. Anko, however, had heard him, and with a smirk she remarked, We'll see how long you're in love with me after training. Naruto bowed his head with a blush burning his cheeks as Anko laughed loudly. Once they had arrived at the training ground, Anko turned around and told Naruto their unique situation. All right, brat. Since the council wants you to advance through the ranks and get strong enough to claim clan status as soon as possible, Hokage-sama has asked me to take you on as my apprentice. She explained as Naruto stood before her and gave her respectful attention. So that's what this is all about. Naruto thought as he remembered the one particular meeting he had with the full council of Konoha. Flashback 1 week after Naruto discovered his bloodline. Naruto had been called by the Hokage to attend a meeting with the council to explain his new situation in the village as well as in the ninja forces. As Naruto was led into the council chambers by the Hokage, he was told to stand in the center of the room and wait to be spoken to. This meeting of the Council of Konoha is now in session, Sarutobi said as he called the meeting to order. What has this meeting been called for, Hokage-sama? The Sandame's old teammate Mitokado Hamura asked as he turned towards his leader. I've called this meeting to announce that a Kekkei Genkai, one that was thought to be extinct for decades now, has reappeared in our very own village. Sarutobi replied as he looked straight ahead at Naruto. You mean this boy has the Hokage's other teammate Udatane Koharu tried to say as every one of the council members' faces were frozen in shock. Yes, that's correct. Uzumaki Naruto has awakened a Kekkei Genkai that hasn't been seen in almost 50 years. Sarutobi explained as the council chambers erupted in noise and exclamations of demands. Silence, he yelled out as the council chambers instantly quieted. If I may ask, Hokage-sama, Danzo said from his seat, what Kekkei Genkai has reawakened in this boy? Sarutobi knew Danzo was already plotting ways to get Naruto under his control, but he answered nonetheless. Naruto here has reawakened the Dokushu bloodline, a bloodline that hasn't been seen since the start of the Third Great Ninja War. This started the councils arguing almost instantly. Shouts about betrothals, breeding, and demands for him to be trained as an obedient weapon were heard throughout the room. I said silence, shouted Sarutobi as he slammed a fist on top of his desk. The council quickly became quiet at the killing intent the old Hokage was releasing. Naruto is under shinobi jurisdiction. Therefore, the civilian representatives on the council have no say in any matters pertaining to the boy. With that said, the civilians quickly became silent. Hokage-sama, might I take the boy and train him in the ninja arts? I can guarantee the boy will be the most powerful shinobi in our ranks within a few short years. Danzo stated calmly as he eyed the boy like a high-quality tool. I have no intention of taking Naruto out of academy for any reason until he graduates. Am I clear, Danzo? Sarutobi asked as he leveled the full brunt of his killing intent on the old war hawk. Hokage-sama, if I may, could I set up a marriage contract with the boy to my daughter? Asked one of the civilians with a greedy gleam in his eyes. No way in hell, you civilian asshole. Naruto thought as he glared at the man. While it is true that Naruto does qualify for the bloodline clan restoration laws, Sarutobi stated, he will be allowed to choose the woman or women he settles down with to start his family in the future. Naruto smirked at the civilians as they all gained sour looks on their faces. Then Uzumaki-san must be allowed to claim clan head status as soon as possible, Koharu proclaimed as she looked at the other shinobi clan heads. Unfortunately for Uzumaki-san, he must have a bloodline along with a rank of Chunin or higher, not to mention at least one heir or a woman carrying his child, to start the clan he will be head of, stated Hyuga Hayashi as he read a copy of Konoha's clan laws from a scroll in front of him. I'm sure Naruto will make Chunin shortly after he graduates the academy. However, how long until he has an heir is up to him, Sarutobi remarked as he motioned Naruto to speak. I'll make Chunin as soon as I can after graduation, Hokage-sama. Naruto spoke. However, I'd like to be at least 13 or 14 before I even consider having a child. I'm only 8. I can't be a dad yet, he said as he gained the cute, confused expression of a child his age. End flashback. After that day, Naruto had worked harder than ever towards mastering his bloodline. By the time graduation had rolled around, Naruto had gotten his bloodline to the point of near mastery. He could instinctively activate his Dokusuken, one, at any moment that he sensed a hostile motion towards himself. Not to mention that he could control what type of poison he produced at the same moment. He had also pushed the boundaries of his bloodline into several new techniques that he had created from theories inside the scroll the Sandaime had given him the day he discovered his Kekkei Genkai. All right, brat, Anko called to her new apprentice. I need to test you to see where you stand in the ninja arts. Naruto smiled at her before replying. All right, and how do you plan to test me, sensei? Anko smirked evilly. The best way, of course. By sparring until you drop. With that, she charged at Naruto with a kunai in each hand. Naruto smirked at her before meeting her charge with 2 kunai of his own. Anko made the first swipe with her left kunai before stabbing with her right. Naruto dodged the left swipe and blocked the stab with his own kunai before bringing his own down on Anko's head. She quickly kicked him away and threw both of her kunai at him as she jumped back before launching 4 snakes from her right sleeve. Naruto knocked both kunai away and jumped away from the snakes. To his surprise, the 4 snakes changed course and followed him towards the other side of the clearing. That's surprising, Naruto thought before using both kunai to decapitate all 4 snakes, causing them to disappear in poofs of smoke. Brats, not bad, Anko mused before speeding through hand seals and sending a Katon Gakakyu, 2, at Naruto's location. He looked at the incoming fireball before smirking. Doesn't hold back at all, I like that, he thought before speeding through his own hand seals. Suetun Tepidama, 3, Naruto exclaimed before sending a ball of water of equal size towards the fireball. The 2 opposing attacks slammed into each other in a large splash of water and steam. So you know how to use more than your bloodline, huh, brat? Anko questioned as she put a little distance between herself and the dispersing cloud of steam. Of course, sensei. I'm not so arrogant as to think that my bloodline is invincible like most other bloodline clans. Naruto replied before taking up a taijutsu stance and waiting for Anko's next move. I'm starting to like you already, brat. Anko yelled as she disappeared from Naruto's line of sight for an instant before reappearing behind him with a back fist aimed at his left temple. To her shock, Naruto's forearm blocked her attack, while his right elbow came around as he spun and nicked her side before she managed to jump away. You're good, brat, I'll give you that. But how about you show me what you can really do? Anko questioned with a smirk. All right, sensei, but remember, you asked for it. With that, Naruto shed his burnt orange overshirt, leaving him in just his mesh undershirt and ninja pants. He took a deep breath, and when he exhaled, a dark purple mist came from his mouth. Before long, a dark greenish-purple chakra coated his exposed arms, back and chest, with a purple and green mist rising off said areas and lingering around the boy. Impressive, Anko thought as she watched his display. This makes taijutsu all but suicidal. With that thought, Anko sped through another set of hand seals before sending a Suetun Mizurappa 4 at the boy to test his bloodline's defensive capabilities. Naruto quickly sidestepped the high-pressured blast of water before making a punching motion towards Anko on the other side of the clearing. Anko was slightly surprised when a column of greenish smoke came flying at her at the same speed as a punch. She quickly jumped up to the tree branch above herself before looking down at the area she stood in previously. The ground where she once stood was covered in dead grass, and the air around it was filled with the lingering remains of the poisonous smoke the blonde had sent at her. You like it, sensei? Naruto questioned from his position in the clearing. I call it Dokikamori no Jutsu. 5. Naruto explained as he prepared another punch. It lets me launch poison attacks at my opponent from a distance. Anko quickly masked her shock before replying, Not bad, brat. Try this on for size. With that remark, she again disappeared from his sight. Next thing he realized, several kunai and shuriken were heading at him from various directions. Naruto quickly dodged the projectiles before he spun around and launched another punch at Anko, who was rushing up behind him with a kunai out to stab him from behind. The same green smoke launched from his fist and impacted the woman, sending her tumbling back into the ground. To Naruto's slight surprise, the Anko he hit dissolved into mud, while another Anko appeared on top of a tree branch several feet to his right. Tsuchi Bunshin 6, huh? Naruto questioned as he looked at her. Anko said nothing as several more Anko clones emerged from the surrounding woods. So using clones that can't be poisoned to counteract my bloodline. While it makes taijutsu a possible attack method, the clones will disperse shortly after striking me, Naruto said as he quickly jumped higher and higher into the trees. Then again, for only a little more chakra than you used to make all those clones, I can do this, he exclaimed as he finished a string of hand seals. Miasma no Jutsu. 7. He yelled as he spewed a thick purple, almost black, cloud of poison from his mouth. The jutsu felt almost like water as it was released down into the clearing below. All of the clones were swept away by the jutsu's amazing density, and when it hit the ground, the entire clearing floor was covered in a thick poisonous cloud that was several feet high. Naruto scanned the treetops as he looked for his sensei. He knew she was far too crafty to have been taken down by that attack. Now all he had to do was wait for the counterattack. He didn't have to wait long before a cry of Futon de Tapa 8 sent him face first into the tree in front of him. How do you like that, brat? Anko questioned before she threw several pairs of kunai, with a length of ninja wire connecting each pair, all around Naruto, effectively pinning him to the tree. Not bad at all, sensei. Naruto mumbled with his face still in the tree. But I've still got a jutsu for situations when I can't move to defend myself. He mumbled out before bringing his hands together between him and the tree and going through several hand seals. Yudoka Yuko no Jutsu 9. Naruto yelled as he completed the jutsu. Suddenly, the purple and green mist that surrounded Naruto compressed into 5 separate clouds of poison. Each cloud then took on a distinctly vulpine form before opening bright green eyes. All 5 dark purple poison cloud foxes locked their glowing green eyes on Anko before rushing her all at once. What the hell? Anko yelled and asked at the same time as she had to duck and weave to avoid these strange poison creatures that Naruto had created. One of the foxes dove down from above Anko as she jumped to avoid another that tried to take a bite out of her side. She saw it coming and sidestepped the fox and watched it fall into the miasma that was still coating the forest floor below. Before she could wonder if that had taken it out, two other foxes tried to catch her in a pincer maneuver. She jumped over both of them before grabbing the branch above herself and swinging up onto it. Damn, she thought with a grimace. These things are fast and agile as hell. Not to mention, I can't touch them without getting poisoned. Anko quickly moved to avoid a fox trying to get the jump on her and landed several feet behind where she had just stood. All right, she thought excitedly as she saw all four foxes directly in front of her. Now I'll just torch all the bastards and be done with them. She quickly started hand seals for a katon jutsu before she felt a searing pain in her right leg. Shit, that fucking hurts. Anko yelled as she looked down to find the fox that had fallen into the miasma biting into her leg. Damn it, she thought as she kicked the fox back towards its companions. I should have known poison wouldn't destroy these things. They're made of poison. When the one she kicked landed in front of its compatriots, the other four that were moving to attack stopped in their tracks. Katon Karyu Enden, 10. Anko shouted as she unleashed a massive fire dragon at the foxes who, taken by surprise, were instantly torched and incinerated by the flames. Take that, you bastards. She panted out as she felt the poison beginning to take effect. My vision's getting blurry, she thought as she felt her strength leaving her. She jumped to the branch Naruto was pinned on and held a kunai to his throat. I win, you little brat. Anko panted as she cut the wires holding him while she collapsed to the branch they were standing on. Don't worry, Anko-sensei, I'll remove the toxins from you. You'll be awake and feeling better in a couple minutes. Naruto stated as he began drawing the poison out of her body with a green and purple chakra-covered hand. After having removed the toxins from Anko's body, Naruto couldn't help but stare at her sleeping form. Man, being on missions with her is going to be awkward with how she dresses, he thought with a blush as he couldn't keep his eyes from roaming her body at least once. Still, I don't think I could ask for a better sensei. Hopefully when she wakes up, I'll know where she plans to start my training, he thought as he kept watch over her as she rested from their intense spar. Several minutes later, Anko groaned before opening her eyes. What the hell happened? She asked before mumbling. Oh right, I got bitten by one of the brat's foxes. Looking up, she saw the smiling face of said brat before he spoke. Did you sleep well, Anko-sensei? Naruto asked as he helped her sit up. I'll be fine, brat. I have to say you've got some rather impressive skills for a genin, she commented before standing up and popping her back. So what level do you rank me at, sensei? He questioned with a curious look on his face. You're a solid Chunin level ninja already, brat, she replied. Give me until tomorrow and I'll have your rank in all of the aspects you've shown me in this fight. Naruto smiled widely at her assessment before standing up himself. Well, where to now, sensei? Naruto asked. Let's head into the village to celebrate your graduation to genin, Anko replied as she started tree hopping to get out of the forest of death and into the village proper. Naruto nodded before following along behind her. After they had reached the restaurant area of the business district, they had immediately gotten into an argument about what to have to celebrate. We're having dango, you brat, and that's final, Anko yelled as she stomped her foot on the ground. Oh come on, sensei. Why can't we have ramen? I always have ramen when I celebrate something, Naruto said as he tried to give her puppy dog eyes. Sorry, brat, that look only works for us women, Anko said as she smirked at him. All right, I can be a gentleman when I need to be. Naruto sighed before he straightened up and offered Anko his arm. Care to lead the way, sensei? He asked politely. Anko snorted before taking the offered arm and leading him to her favorite dango place. Just don't try and get fresh, brat. You wouldn't like what happens if you did, she warned as she brought him into the shop. One order of dango for me and the brat, old man, Anko ordered with a smile as she sat at the bar with Naruto to her right. Coming right up in Kosen, the old chef said as he began to make her order. So brat, now that we have a few minutes, why don't you tell me about yourself? She asked as Naruto took a sip of water from his glass before nodding. All right, my name is Uzumaki Naruto. I like Hokugiji, poisons, training, reading, and my new sensei. I dislike Sasuke and all his annoying fangirls, people who judge others, rapists, people that hurt children, and people who look down on women just because they're female. My hobbies are training, reading, gardening, experimenting with my bloodline, and making friends. My dreams for the future are to become a clan head and start a family. and if possible be Hokage for a while so I can protect Konoha. When he finished, Anko was rather happy about his introduction. Seems we've finally found a bloodline user that doesn't think the world of himself. He even seems to have a rather high respect for women. That's always a plus in a man. Anko thought before she started her own introduction. My name is Mitarashi Anko. I like Dango, Sake, my friends Kurenai, Hana, and Yugao, and the old man Hokage. I dislike arrogant pricks, my former sensei, chauvinist pigs, rapists, child abusers, traitors, and people who judge others based on past associations. My hobbies are training, working in the torture and interrogation department, and hanging out with my friends. My dream is to kill my sensei, or at least know that he's dead. I'd also like to find a man that'll treat me right and have a family. She finished with a small blush as she thought about having a husband and child of her own. Order up, said the old chef as he placed 2 plates loaded with dango in front of Naruto and Anko. You know I never took you for a woman that was into younger men, Anko-san. The old chef giggled perversely. Oh, shut it, Jinji-san. She replied with a light blush on her cheeks. He's my student, not a date. Naruto nodded but turned towards the old chef and said, I would be greatly honored if Anko-sensei would take me as her date, though. The old chef laughed loudly while Anko blushed scarlet and quickly put Naruto in a headlock. Don't get cocky, brat. You've got a long way to go before you gain that kind of privilege, she said as she messed up his hair with her free hand. After the two had finished their celebratory meal, they parted ways for the evening. Naruto went to his apartment to tend to his poison garden, while Anko went to go write up her preliminary report for the Hokage. After a couple hours, Anko had finished her report and turned it over to the Hokage for his inspection. After she had left, Sarutobi and his former teammates opened the file and perused its contents. Anko's report. As requested by the Hokage of Konohagakure no Sato, I, Mitarashi Anko, tested one Uzumaki Naruto's abilities in the ninja arts in a full sparring match with no restrictions. From said match, I've ranked Uzumaki Naruto's skills according to his proficiency as displayed. Name, Uzumaki Naruto. Age, 12. Status, active ninja. Rank, Jinin. Ninjutsu rank, C-class Jounin. Jinjutsu rank, unknown, likely Jinin level. Taijutsu rank, A-class Chunin. Weapons rank, A-class Chunin. Speed rank, C-class Chunin. Reaction time rank, B-class Chunin. Overall ranking, BA-class Chunin. End Anko's report. This bodes well for Naruto making Chunin on this year's exams. They'll even be held shortly after his birthday, if I'm correct, spoke Sarutobi as he finished the report. That is assuming you two also give your support to the boy to participate. Both Hamura and Koharu looked at the Hokage before speaking. Sarutobi, you know neither of us holds anything against the boy, said Koharu as she looked at her former teammate. She's correct, Sarutobi. We hold no ill will for young Naruto, but we fear that beast inside him more than anything else in this world. Hamura finished with a scared tone. The possibility of that beast and its power falling into an enemy's hands is the only reason we would ever deny the boy a chance to participate in anything, Koharu said as she sat down beside Sarutobi. We'll all make sure that such a thing never happens, Sarutobi replied as he rolled up the scroll and placed it in his robes. Now I bid you both good night. It has been a long day, and I think we all could use some rest. With a nod, the two advisors parted ways with the Hokage, and all three left to their own residences. Chapter 3 Missions and Full Toxicity. Naruto awoke at 7 in the morning the day after testing to meet Anko for their first mission together. As he was going through his morning routine, he began to wonder what his first few missions with his new sensei were going to be like. I doubt it'll be anything incredible, Naruto thought as he locked his apartment and made his way to the missions office to meet his sensei and receive their first mission. Once Naruto was in sight of the doors to the Hokage Tower, he saw his sensei leaning against the wall beside the doors. When she looked up at him, he gave her a cheerful grin before greeting her. Good morning, Anko-sensei, he said before he gave her a respectful bow. Good morning, brat, Anko replied as she smirked at him. Let's go start the most boring missions of your life, she said with a sigh before leading him into the tower. After receiving a few drank missions from the Chunin on duty, both sensei and student left the mission's office and headed for the home of their first client of the day. After arriving at one of the multitudes of small farms on the outskirts of the village walls, the duo knocked on the front door. Moments later, an elderly man answered, and after seeing their headbands, smiled and let them into his living room. "So, you two are the ninja that gonna get rid of those vermin for me?" The old man questioned as his equally old wife served them both some tea. "Yes, sir. That's what we're here for," Anko answered as she sipped her tea. "So what kind of vermin do you need exterminated?" Naruto questioned as he also sipped his tea. "I need those damn rats out of my fields and out of my chicken coops," the old man complained as he scratched his gray hair in exhaustion as he suddenly looked his full age. "Rats, sir?" Naruto questioned as he finished his tea. "That's right, youngin. But I'm certain these ain't no normal rats. They always escape the traps I use, and sometimes they even take the bait without setting the traps off. There ain't no normal rats that can do that," the old farmer said as he sighed tiredly. "Don't worry, sir," Anko said kindly. "We'll have the whole population taken care of before lunch." The old man's face lit up with a small smile as he showed them the way to the barn where he kept his crops after harvesting them. "This is where the monsters do the most damage," he said as he showed them all of the debated traps. "Well, I'll leave you youngins to it. Let me know when those monsters are all gone," the old man said before he went back to his house to await the results. "All right, brat. Since this is our first mission, I'll be helping you," Anko said as she pulled out a kunai. "When you see a rat, you do this." With that, she threw her kunai and impaled a dark gray rat through the head. "Seems simple enough," Naruto replied before taking out several of his poisoned senbon and letting them loose into 6 other rats that had come out from behind one of the many farming tools lining the walls of the barn. Within a second, all 6 rats were completely still and quite obviously dead. They both kept at it for about an hour before deeming the barn cleared out. After moving to the large chicken coop, the two began the process of removing the infestation of rats. About half an hour after the two began, something strange happened with one of the rats Naruto targeted with his senbon. To both Naruto and Anko's shock, the rat not only stood on its hind legs, it also rapidly moved its head out of the path of the senbon and looked at them with an affronted look on its small face. "What was that for?" the small rodent questioned the two ninja as it sniffed at them from the wall it stood in front of. "Anko-sensei," Naruto said. "Yeah, brat?" Anko questioned. "Did that rat just speak to us?" he asked. Yes, it did," she replied as she put her kunai away. "I believe we may have just stumbled upon the root of our client's problem," she said as she knelt down and looked at the rat. "You're a summon animal, aren't you?" When she said that, Naruto's eyes widened and he began to walk over to the rat cautiously. "Do you have a human summoner?" Anko asked as she let the rat sniff her hand. "Nope, can't say I do, Snake Lady," the rat replied as he sat back down and scratched his side with his back leg. "Snake Lady?" Naruto asked the rat with a pointed look. "Yeah, she smells like the snake summons," the rat answered as he began sniffing Naruto. "Why are you here if you weren't summoned?" Anko questioned as she watched the rat climb up Naruto's arm while continually sniffing the boy. "Looking for some good food, of course," the rat replied as he sat in Naruto's hair and looked at Anko lazily. "How long have you been here?" Naruto asked as he tried to look up at the rat on his head. "Just a few weeks," the rat sighed as it rolled around in Naruto's soft blonde hair. "Are all these other rats summons?" Anko asked as the rat snuggled deeper into Naruto's hair. "Nah, they're regular, everyday dumbass rats," the rat replied as it curled up for a nap on Naruto's head. "So you're the only summon here? You're the rat that's been debating all the traps?" Naruto questioned the lazily dozing rat. "Yeah, I guess that'd be me," the rat replied tiredly. "Now will you let me sleep?" the rat asked as it went back to dozing on Naruto's head. "Yeah, sure, have a nice nap, big guy," Naruto replied kindly as he stood up. "All right, brat. I'm sure you could finish this up real quick with a little poison," Anko said as she stepped outside the coop and waited for Naruto's all clear. Shortly after departing, clouds of poison started drifting out of the open door and all the small windows. A few minutes later, Naruto came out with a burlap sack of dead rats. "That should be all of them, Anko-sensei," he replied as they headed back to the client's house. After dropping off the sack of dead rats and telling the old farmer that the rat population had been decimated, they got their mission scroll signed by the client and headed off to their next drink. Their next mission turned out to be the infamous Retrieve Tora mission. After tracking the cat into the forest, Naruto released a poisoned Senbon into its back leg and let it run off. Once they had tracked it down again, the cat was already fast asleep and unable to put up a fight. When Anko and Naruto returned the sleeping cat to its owner and getting the mission signed off on as complete, they went to complete their final task for the day. The last mission of the day was walking the Inuzuka dogs. Once the two had arrived, the clan head, Inuzuka Tsum, led them to the kennels where her daughter, Inuzuka Hana, was waiting with the dogs on leashes. Just walk them around the park down the street and bring him back. That'll be enough exercise for today. Tsum told them as Hana gave the leashes to Naruto. Of course, Inuzuka-sama. I'll take good care of them in Nuzukahime, Naruto said to Tsum and Hana respectively. After Naruto said that, Tsum gained a feral grin while Hana smirked with a light blush on her cheeks. What's this about, brat? I thought you were in love with me. Anko teasingly pouted at him. But you said I haven't earned it yet. Naruto replied with a joking smile. Well, if you do this well enough, I'm sure Hana and I could give you a little tip for your services. Tsum said with a grin as Naruto blushed and stuttered out that it wasn't necessary. Shortly afterwards, Naruto was being halfway dragged around the park by the 12 or so dogs that he held by leashes. Would you guys at least go in the same direction? He asked the dogs as they once again went multiple directions. After finally getting the dogs around the park and back to the Inuzuka compound, Hana put the dogs into their kennels while Naruto sat on the back porch of Tsum's house gulping down a bottle of water. Well, looks like you did pretty well, Naruto, Tsum said as she came up to him from the kennels. The dogs looked quite happy with their walk. Hana added as she quickly gave him a small kiss on the cheek before retreating into the house. Naruto was blushing up a storm and trying to talk before Tsum burst out laughing at the embarrassed teenage boy. After Naruto calmed down, he stood before Tsum and asked her to sign the mission scroll. Once she signed it, and Naruto put it into his pouch for later delivery, Tsum quickly grasped his jaw and brought his lips to hers in an intense kiss that left Naruto stunned. Naruto's jaw dropped as his mind stalled as he tried to process what was happening. When Naruto's mouth opened, Tsum took her chance and pushed her tongue into his mouth while grabbing his right hand and placing it on her firm ass. Naruto's mind had completely shut down at this point, and he just stood there dumbly. Once she'd had her fun, Tsum released the boy who simply stood there transfixed. "Uho, Tsum, I think you broke him." Anko chuckled as she waved her hand in front of Naruto's unblinking face. Tsum chuckled as well before responding. "Yeah, he should wake up in a few minutes," she replied, "though I wouldn't mind taking him to my bed at all, either." Tsum finished while leering at Naruto. "Yeah, he'd probably be a great father," Anko said with a smirk as she watched Naruto continue to stand there unmoving. "I bet the pups he'd father would be incredibly strong as well. Makes me want him all the more." Tsum responded with a grin as Naruto finally regained movement before blushing up a storm and practically sprinting out of the Inuzuka compound. Both Anko and Tsum laughed loudly at the teenager's innocence. Maybe he'll be interested in a clan alliance in a couple months once he makes Chunin? Tsum pondered out loud as she sat on her porch. "I'll ask him for you," Anko responded before leaving the compound with a wave and a smile. When Anko caught up to Naruto, he was still blushing and trying to calm down. "What's wrong, brat? Not used to the wiles of women?" Anko questioned with a laugh as she walked beside him. I know I'm not," he stuttered out as they walked towards the Hokage Tower. What did I miss?" questioned the summoned rat as he poked his head out of Naruto's blonde locks. "You're still there?" Naruto questioned as he tried to look up at the rat. "How did you stay up there this whole time?" he asked as the rat stretched out before sitting on top of his head. "I wrapped myself in your hair. Makes a great blanket, by the way," the rat explained as he scratched his ear. "So what are you still doing here?" Anko questioned as she eyed the summon. "Well, since Poison Man here was kind enough to let me nap in his hair, I thought I'd put in a good word for him with the boss." The summoned rat answered with a shrug. "You mean you want to ask your boss to allow me to summon your kind?" Naruto questioned in shock, while Anko's eyes widened as well. "Yep," the rat replied before he disappeared in a puff of smoke. "Damn, brat, you might just be getting a summoning contract before you're even out of the academy for more than a month," Anko said as she continued on towards the Hokage Tower. Time skip 1 month later. After a month of drank missions, Anko finally snapped. "Damn it, old man. Give us at least a crank. I'm tired of these boring-ass chores." After her outburst, she blushed and recomposed herself. I believe my apprentice is more than ready for more difficult missions, she said as she bowed to the aged leader. Naruto was simply nodding his head in agreement with his sensei. Very well, Anko. I'll trust your judgment on this matter, Sarutobi replied as he pulled a scroll out of the crank stack and gave it to her. There's a gang of bandits on the outskirts of Kekkei village that have been causing too much trouble. They've been linked to theft, rape, and murder already. The town elder has commissioned us to get rid of them by any means necessary. I trust you too with resolving this quickly, he said as Anko looked over the mission scroll. Yes, sir, Hokage-sama. Both Anko and Naruto replied with a bow as they left the mission office to prepare for their mission. Once the two met up at the gates of the village, Anko checked Naruto's gear. After deeming it acceptable for a few-day-long crank, they took off into the forest and began tree hopping. After tree hopping for several hours, the duo came to a stop in a small clearing far from the main pathways. All right, brat. We'll make camp here for the night and arrive in the village tomorrow morning, Anko said as she started setting up a tent for the night. I'll get the firewood for tonight, Anko-sensei, Naruto said before he went into the forest to collect what they'd need. After bringing back an armload of firewood as well as 2 rabbits he had killed with a well-placed kunai each, Naruto and Anko set about cooking their own rabbit over the newly made fire. After dinner, Naruto noticed that Anko hadn't set up the tent he'd brought and asked her about it. I'm not going to hold your hand through this mission, brat. Either set up your own tent or sleep in mine, she responded before going into her tent for the night. Afterwards, Naruto simply set up his own tent before going to bed for the night. Damn, Anko thought with slight disappointment. I was kinda hoping he'd take me up on my offer. With that final thought, she drifted off to sleep for the night. The next morning, after a short breakfast of pre-made food, the two headed towards Kekkei at top speed. When they arrived, the two could tell the village had been harassed several times by the bandits they had come to eliminate. After being shown to the village elder and explaining that they were the team sent to rid them of their bandit problem, the elder directed them to the last known camp of the bandits and begged them to get rid of them before their village was attacked again. Anko and Naruto had no trouble tracking the bandits to the camp as the bandits obviously didn't bother covering their tracks. After scouting the camp and determining that all the bandits were there, the two ninja waited for nightfall before they made a move. All right, brat, show me some of that poison work of yours, Anko told Naruto. He nodded before going through hand seals and whispering, Inbijiburu Dakuso no Jutsu. 1. With that, Naruto inhaled deeply before breathing out a colorless, odorless toxin into the camp. Once he used the jutsu, he told Anko to wait 5 minutes before he'd go down into the camp and make sure everyone was dead. After the 5 minutes had passed, Naruto ventured down into the camp and began checking pulses. Once he'd checked the last pulse of the last bandit, he exited the tent before making his way back to let Anko know she could torch the camp and they could complete their mission. When he reached the center of camp, he sensed incoming projectiles and hit the ground. He heard 3 distinct hits, and when he looked up, he saw 3 kunai lodged in a wooden post he had been walking past before he ducked. He looked back to where the kunai came from to see a ninja from Kusa, if the headband was any indication. The thing that Naruto noticed the most, however, was the slash mark going through the metal plate that denoted the man before him as a missing nin. So you're the little brat that took out all my little minions? He asked as he pulled out more kunai. So you're the leader of these bastards? Naruto questioned as he got ready for combat. Yeah, I am, the Kusa nin replied. I'm also the leader of these guys, he said with a laugh as he snapped his fingers and 20 bandits came out from hiding. Let me guess, Naruto asked. You have a few rebreathers, don't you? The Kusa nin and his goons laughed as they showed off their masks that let them survive the poison. Figure scumbags like you would have stolen something like that, Naruto remarked while slowly circulating massive amounts of chakra through his body. Suddenly, Anko landed behind Naruto and pulled out her own kunai while she stared down the thugs. Seems you ran into some trouble, brat, she said with a smirk. No trouble, sensei, just a little unfinished business, he replied with a smile at her. Check out the babe, the Kusa missing nin called out as he and his men leered at Anko's body. Don't get any ideas, bastard, Anko snarled at him. Don't worry, slut. We'll be having a lot of fun with you once we get rid of the brat, the Kusa missing nin responded as his men cheered. I'm afraid you and your goons won't get the chance, you dumbass, Naruto said as he started releasing massive amounts of thick poisonous smoke from his body. Anko-sensei, please step back and observe, I'll show you my true full power right now, Naruto said as Anko looked at him questioningly. You sure, brat? She asked with a raised eyebrow. Yes, I don't want you to get caught up in my techniques. He replied with a serious tone. All right, brat, take them out. I've wondered what the full extent of your bloodline was since I saw it in action. Anko told him before she leapt backwards and onto the roof of a second-story house about 100 feet behind Naruto. Kill that little shit. The Kusa missing Nin yelled as all of the bandits charged at Naruto with weapons drawn. Foolish, Yudoka Futon, Doka de Tapa. 2. Naruto yelled as he unleashed a massive surge of poisonous wind at the bandits that sent them all flying back into several tents. Huh, you stupid punk. Did you forget we all have these rebreathers? The ex-Kusa Nin laughed as the bandits began to get up from the ruined tents. Nope, that was just a test. Here's where this massacre is going to get interesting, Naruto said as he sped through several more hand seals. Yudoku Sueton, Dakuso Teppadama. 3. He shouted before firing off 5 spheres of pure liquid poison at the bandits. 5 bandits were hit, while 10 more were splashed by poison that flew off the first 5 bandits. Shortly after they were hit, all 15 bandits were on the ground screaming out in intense pain. Before the other bandits could recover, Naruto was moving in with his hands covered in chakra. Ekidoka Sentu. 4. Naruto yelled as he punched the first bandit in the jaw. The second bandit got a back fist to his throat, while the third got a knife hand to the back of the neck. The fourth and fifth both got palm heels into their chins and were unconscious before they hit the ground. The ex-Kusa Nin was stunned. This kid had just taken out 20 full-grown men in less than a minute. This wasn't some ordinary genin. This kid was some kind of monster. Doton, Tsuchi Bunshin no Jutsu. The Kusa missing Nin yelled out as he created 20 clones. You can't beat me, you little bastard. All the clones yelled as they charged the boy. Naruto nimbly dodged between the strikes of the Kusa missing Nin and his clones before being surrounded by the clones. Now we've got you, damn it. The ex-Kusanin yelled out with a laugh. Not really, now you're all in range, Naruto said as he smirked before unleashing the massive amount of chakra he'd built up inside of his body. Dokushu Hijitsu, Hakayaku no Dakuso. 5. He yelled as a massive explosion of dark green poisonous smoke and purple liquid poison exploded off his body and covered the entire camp in multiple types of poison. Damn it, brat. Anko yelled as she had just barely managed to outrun the boy's jutsu. Shortly after the jutsu was used, Anko saw Naruto walk out of the thick green smoke and stand before her. The poisons should wear off in a couple hours, Anko-sensei. I got that guy's head sealed in this scroll, he said as he showed her a plain sealing scroll. That jutsu takes an ass load of chakra, even for me. But there's no chance of survival for any living thing caught inside the blast radius, Naruto explained before Anko smacked him in the back of the head. If it has a 0% chance of survival, then don't use it when I'm in range, you brat. She yelled at him before she started dragging him back to Takiji village to report a completed mission and to get the elder to sign the mission scroll. Yes, Anko-sensei, sorry Anko-sensei, Naruto replied as he started walking beside her. After getting the scroll signed by the elder after showing him the head of the Kusa missing Nin, the two left Takiji village and headed back to Konoha. When night fell, Naruto set up his tent while Anko hunted their dinner. After Anko returned with a small boar, they roasted it and had a large meal as a sort of celebration for Naruto's first completed crank mission. Once the meal was completed, Naruto went into his tent to sleep for the night. Just before he fell asleep, he heard the tent flap open. When he shot up to see who it was, he saw Anko entering his tent. What are you doing, sensei? He questioned as she closed the tent flap. I'm getting ready to go to sleep. What's it look like, brat? She asked as she slipped her trench coat off, giving Naruto an eyeful of her fishnet-clad breasts. Anko-sensei. Naruto panicked as he used his blanket to block his eyes. Don't get so excited, brat. I told you I came in here to sleep. I don't plan on having sex with you tonight, she said as she used her trench coat as a blanket and laid down beside him. Oh, okay, whatever you say, Anko-sensei, Naruto replied before turning over so that his back was to his sensei. Good night, sensei, he said as he tried to fall back to sleep. Night, brat, Anko replied as she snuggled into her trench coat. The next morning, Anko woke up shortly after sunrise. As she sat up and stretched, she noticed that Naruto had twisted himself out of his blankets. Restless little brat, aren't you? She thought before looking down to see if she could get out of the tent without waking him. She stopped when she saw that Naruto was sporting his morning problem and stared at it transfixed. The little brat has to be close to 6 inches, and he hasn't even finished growing yet. Anko thought, shocked at Naruto's impressive growth in that certain department. Without really thinking, her hand began to inch towards Naruto's length. Once her fingertips touched it, she instantly wrapped her hand around it. Shit, he's at least 2 inches wide, she thought as she felt her cheeks warm up in a blush. Muh. Naruto mumbled in his sleep as Anko's eyes snapped towards his face. Thankfully, he continued to sleep. Anko went back to looking at Naruto's erection. She began to stroke it at a slow pace with a blush still on her face. Naruto was groaning constantly in his sleep at this point. That's right, brat. You like that, don't you? You like what Anko-sensei is doing to you. You want her to make you come, right? Anko thought with her lust-clouded mind. Whoa, wait. What am I doing? He's only 12 for Kami's sake. I need to get out of this tent and calm down. She mentally screamed before bolting out of the tent to clear her head. Almost half an hour later, Naruto crawled out of the tent and looked around for his sensei. You finally ready to go, brat? Anko asked as she stood in the middle of the clearing. Yes, sensei, Naruto said before he quickly sealed the tent away, and they both began tree-hopping back towards Konoha. As they were making their way back, Anko decided to make some light conversation. Hey brat, what kind of jutsu did you use to cause that massive blast of poison that wiped out that camp? She asked with some curiosity. Oh, that was one of the hijitsu I've created for my clan. It can only be used by someone that has the dokushu mastered to an instinctual level like I do. It's also a technique that uses my full toxicity, Naruto explained as they continued to jump from tree to tree. I see. I guess I'll have to start requesting more cranks like this one then, just so I can see some more of these bloodline techniques of yours, she stated as she pushed off the branch she was on. By the way, brat, what do you mean by full toxicity? Anko asked as she looked towards Naruto. It means I use my full spectrum of poisons in one single jutsu. There is no way to make an antidote for someone that has been poisoned multiple times with various poisons. Anyone hit by a full toxicity attack from any of my future clan members won't be able to survive, he explained as they both could finally see the gates of Konoha through the trees. Once they had arrived and made their way to the Hokage's office, the two stood before the old man and gave him their mission report as well as the signed mission scroll. I see. So a missing nin from Kusa was controlling the bandits. That would explain why Takiji Village's police force couldn't handle them, Sarutobi stated as he exhaled the smoke from his pipe. But in any case, I'm sure Kusa will enjoy receiving this man's head. I'll be sure to call you in when they send the bounty money to us, Naruto, he said with a proud grandfatherly smile on his old face. Thanks, Gigi, Naruto said with a smile as he rubbed the back of his head. Also, since you did encounter and battle a foreign shinobi, I'll have to mark the mission as a brank to compensate for the increased risk. Congratulations, Naruto. You're officially the youngest genin to complete a brank mission in over a decade, the Sandaime said with a grin. Awesome, Gigi. Now everyone will know how great me and Anko-sensei are as a team, Naruto exclaimed happily while Anko just smirked at him and the old Hokage chuckled at his antics. It was shortly after leaving the mission office that Anko and Naruto went their separate ways. Anko went to catch up with her friends at their favorite hangout, while Naruto headed towards his apartment to tend to his poison garden. On the way to his home, Naruto ran into the one team he would rather have avoided by any means possible. Team 7 was walking down the same path as Naruto when they saw him and approached him. Hey Dobe, have you been dropped out of the ninja forces yet? Sasuke asked with a smirk on his face. Yabaka, have you been kicked out so everyone can see how much better Sasuke-kun is? Sakura screeched at him. Sai simply stood there with an obviously fake smile adorning his face. Kakashi looked up from his book before hitting Sasuke lightly on the head with it. You shouldn't say things like that, Sasuke. Naruto's a fellow Leaf Nin, and you may have to work with him at some point. Kakashi scolded before smiling at Naruto. How have you been since graduating, Naruto? He asked as Sasuke scowled at both Kakashi and Naruto. I've been well, Kakashi-san, Naruto answered with a small smile. Anko-sensei and I just got back from a successful brank mission, he said as Kakashi's eye widened while Sasuke automatically yelled out. You lie, Dobe. They wouldn't let a loser like you do a brank mission before an elite Uchiha like me. Sakura, ever the faithful bitch lapdog, automatically supported him. Yeah, you lying baka. You couldn't even complete a prank. Only Sasuke-kun could do that kind of mission already. She shrieked at him. Naruto was cleaning out his ears from Sakura's yelling before he sighed and looked at Kakashi. If you'll approve it, Kakashi-san, I'd like to prove to your team that I'm more than capable of completing a mission that I've already completed, he said as he looked at Kakashi with a bored expression. Sure, I'm sure it'll be educational for them, Kakashi replied before leading them all to Training Ground 3. When they arrived, Kakashi started to explain the rules of the sparring match. Alright, this is just a sparring match. So no lethal blows and nothing that'll cripple anyone. Other than that, anything goes. But if I call a match, that means it's over. Now this will be one-on-one sparring. At this point, Naruto interrupted him and asked, Actually, Kakashi-san, if it's all the same to you, I'd prefer if you'd make it a 3-on-1 match. I have some other things to take care of that doesn't involve beating those weaker than me, he said as he looked at the 3 members of Team 7. Well, if you're sure, Naruto, Kakashi said while Naruto nodded at him. Alright then, Hajime, Kakashi yelled while he chopped his hand down between Naruto and Team 7. Sasuke instantly sprang forward at Naruto with a punch. At the same time, Sakura stood in the same place and cheered Sasuke on, while Sai jumped back and disappeared into the surrounding forest. Naruto saw Sasuke coming at him and simply sighed before dodging the punch and back fisting Sasuke's right cheek. Sasuke hit the ground hard and laid there stunned. Sasuke-kun, Sakura screeched as she tried to run past Naruto to get to her crush. Naruto, however, didn't let her as he grabbed the back of the collar of her shirt and drug her back in front of him before punching her in the stomach and knocking the wind out of her. You shouldn't be so focused on the Uchiha, Haruno. You left yourself wide open, Naruto said as he quickly back-fisted the ink lion that had tried to pounce on him from behind. Naruto turned around and saw 9 more ink lions preparing to attack him. Come on then, he said with a smile. All 9 lions charged at him, and he quickly dodged Sasuke's sucker punch from behind. Predictable, Uchiha. He smirked before grabbing Sasuke's arm and tossing him into 3 of the ink lions, causing them to disperse. Naruto quickly ducked another lion before punching it in the stomach, causing it to disperse, and then charging another lion before dispersing it with a roundhouse kick to the left side of its head. 5 down, 4 to go, Naruto mumbled before flinging 5 Senbon at them, while he mule-kicked Sasuke, who had tried to sneak up on him. By the time Sasuke had hit the ground, the 4 remaining ink lions had been dispersed by the Senbon, and Sai had fallen out of the tree behind the lions with the 5th Senbon stuck in the left side of his chest. You lose, Uchiha, Naruto said as he stepped on Sasuke's back to keep him from getting up. Winner, Naruto, Kakashi said, slightly shocked as Naruto removed his foot from Sasuke's back. While Naruto was walking away from the sparring area, Sasuke stood up in a rage and flew through hand seals before screaming, Dayu dope, Katan, Gakakyu no Jutsu. Sasuke unleashed a large fireball at Naruto's back. Sasuke, the match is over, Kakashi yelled out while staring at the fireball heading for Naruto's back. Before Sasuke even noticed, Naruto had disappeared from his technique's line of fire and reappeared beside him. Naruto quickly smashed Sasuke in the face and sent him several feet back across the clearing. Why did you have to be so stupid? Naruto sighed before throwing 3 Senbon into each one of Sasuke's arms and legs. After that, Naruto simply walked away from the beaten Team 7. After beating Team 7, Naruto quickly made his way to his apartment and went to his poison garden to calm down. Several hours later, Naruto had cared for his garden and even made a few vials of poisons. He then decided to go have some Ichiraku ramen to end his day on a good note. When he arrived, Naruto greeted Tsuchi and Ayame with a smile and told them to keep the ramen coming. After having several bowls of ramen, Naruto paid his bill and left with a wave to the 2 ramen chefs. When he got back to his apartment, he was in a better mood and more than ready to head to bed. After finishing his shower, Naruto put his pajamas on before slipping into bed with a content smile on his face. Several hours earlier with Anko. After Anko had separated from Naruto for the day, she went to meet up with her friends at their favorite bar. When she entered the bar, she quickly spotted Kurenai, Hana, and Yugao in their usual booth waiting for her. Hey girls, how's everything been going with you? Anko asked as she sat down with them. Kurenai was the first to respond. Training with my team has been going well. I'm planning on requesting a crank mission tomorrow, she said while sipping her drink. Work at the vet has been going well. No serious injuries or diseases have come in. So my works has been rather easy. Hana replied with a sigh as she stirred her drink. I've been training a lot with my squad. Other than that, I've been doing the normal patrols. Yugao said as she finished off her sake with a content sigh. So what have you been up to, Anko? Kurenai asked. Yeah, how has that cutie Naruto been? Hana questioned with a raised eyebrow. Naruto? Oh, you mean the genin with the rare bloodline, right? Yugao asked as she refilled her glass. Yeah, that's him, Yugao. He's been fine, Hana. We just returned from a crank-turned-brank mission. Anko answered with a smile. The brat actually handled the mission perfectly. He took out an entire camp of bandits without making a sound. He even did it with one jutsu. She boasted with a smile. Seriously? All three Kunoichi questioned incredulously. Yep, and when 20 more came out being led by a missing nin from Kusa, he actually asked me to step back. Anko said with a laugh at her friends' shocked faces. Why would he ask you to step back? Questioned Hana. Well, the Kusa pig and his bandit followers made remarks about using me to please them, and that seemed to piss the brat off. Next thing I know, I'm watching him dispatch 15 bandits with a poison swait unjutsu while taking out the last 5 with taijutsu and a bloodline technique. Anko explained with a slight smile and blush adorning her face. Seems like he respects women quite a bit, remarked Kurenai with an approving nod. Oh, believe me, he does. Anko responded with a smirk. How did he deal with the missing nin? Yugao asked curiously. Believe it or not, he not only beat the asshole, he also beat 20 Tsuchi Bunshins before finishing them all off with a hijitsu he created. I'm telling you girls, that jutsu covered that entire camp in so many poisons I don't think an entire team of medic nin could identify them all. Anko gushed slightly while smiling fondly at the memory. Does Snake Mistress Anko have a crush on her genin apprentice? Hana questioned with a teasing tone. No. Anko shouted with a blush. Well, maybe a little. I kind of saw his morning problem when we shared a tent on the way back to the village. She explained as she got a faraway look on her face. Oh, really? Well, how well endowed is the boy? Yugao asked with a raised eyebrow. About 6 inches long and 2 inches thick. Anko replied in a small voice. He was also hard as a rock. She mumbled out. Honestly, Anko, you sound like you touched it. Kurenai exclaimed shocked. I kind of did. Anko replied in the same small voice. I practically gave him a hand job while he was asleep before I regained control of myself. She mumbled out as she downed her entire bottle of sake. Geez, Anko, you're lucky he stayed asleep. Kurenai admonished as she too downed the rest of her drink. Well, you won't have to wait long, Anka-can. Hana stated. Once he turns 13 and becomes a Chunin, he'll need a woman to carry his child so he can claim clan head status. Maybe if you two work out a relationship, you'll be the one who gets to be the lucky woman. She finished with a smirk. That's true enough, Anko. I say you should give it a shot. Where else are you going to find a man as sweet as this Naruto sounds? Yugao asked as she smiled at Anko. While I would normally be against this, it does sound like you two would get along well. That might even become love if you let it happen. Kurenai said as she too gave her support. I just hope you'll be willing to share him. Hana stated with a grin. I wouldn't mind being with a guy that'll actually care about me. Plus I know he's strong, and that means we'd have strong pups together. The dog-like girl finished with a blush of her own. I might consider letting you share him with me, Hana-chan. Anko said with a devious smile. But I get him first, including his first kiss, first date, first blowjob, and his first child. She finished with a glazed expression and a little blood running down from her nose. I'd take that deal. Hana giggled out while Kurenai and Yugao looked back and forth between them with wide eyes. Well, it's getting late, and I gotta torture the brat some more tomorrow and see if we can't get another crank mission. Anko stated as she left the bar and headed home for a good night's sleep. I think I'll tease Naruto-kun a bit tomorrow, she thought with a grin as she slipped into bed and fell asleep to dreams of her with a child of her own that had very familiar blue eyes. Chapter 4 Missions, Training, Summons, and Poison Animation. Naruto woke up the day after his first crank-turned-brank mission and headed towards the bathroom to begin his morning routine. After showering and eating breakfast, he brushed his teeth before heading out to meet his sensei at the training grounds. Wonder what kind of training Anko sensei has planned for today, he wondered as he walked down the street towards the training grounds. Across the village, Anko was awaiting Naruto for morning training. I think I'll see everything the brat can do with his bloodline today. I don't want to be surprised by one of his techniques again, she thought as she leaned against a tree and munched on a stick of dango she had bought on the way there. After waiting for a few more minutes, Anko spotted Naruto entering the training ground with his hands in his pockets. "Good morning, Anko-sensei." He greeted with a smile as he gave her a respectful bow. "Morning, brat." She responded with a grin as she roamed his body with her eyes. "Yep, still a fine young man. With his respectful attitude, he'll make a great husband and a perfect father," she thought with a slight blush that Naruto barely noticed. Is Anko blushing? Naruto thought before shrugging it off. "So what are we doing today, Anko-sensei?" He asked her as he stood in front of Anko. "Today you're going to show me all of your bloodline techniques, so I don't get caught off guard like I did on our last mission," she replied as she gave him a playful glare. "I said I was sorry," Naruto replied as he rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. "Regardless, you're going to show me so I know what to expect from you," she said as she motioned towards the center of the training ground. "Yes, Anko-sensei," he replied before he moved to the center of the field and began producing a purple smoke from both his hands. Naruto completed a sequence of hand seals before speaking his jutsu's name. "Dokusudu no Jutsu." 1. He said as the poison smoke began to move and twist into various shapes. "What does this do, brat?" Anko asked as she watched the poison move around Naruto's body. "This jutsu is the basis of several of my jutsu that move, like my Yudoku Yuko no Jutsu, without me moving them. By using this technique as the base of another technique, I can give it both a form and a more solid density. That's how my poison demon foxes are able to bite and actually pierce flesh. Any jutsu that uses this technique as a base is part of what I call my poison animation collection," he explained as he shifted the poison smoke into the kanji 4. "See, Anko-sensei?" as he smiled at her. "Impressive, brat," Anko remarked with a smirk. "What else can you do?" "I know that can't be it," she stated with a grin. "How about this?" Naruto questioned as he went through several hand seals before calling out, "Dokuryuden no Jutsu." 2. And exhaling a dragon of pure liquid poison towards a group of bushes and trees. The poison dragon splashed over the plants. Within moments, the plants were all withering and dying under the poison's power. "You created a Ryuden Jutsu with your bloodline?" Anko asked, slightly awed. It was no secret that the Ryuden Jutsu, such as the Suiton, Suryuden no Jutsu, or the Katon, Karyo Inden no Jutsu, were highly powerful jutsu that could potentially destroy entire enemy encampments when controlled properly. "Yeah, it takes a lot of chakra though. But I've heard that's common among the Ryuden Jutsu," Naruto replied as he prepared his next jutsu. "Here's another one I created, Anko-sensei," Naruto said as he called out, "Saruigasu no Jutsu." 3. Before exhaling an oddly colored gas towards Anko. "You brat," she yelled before her eyes started to burn and she started sneezing, hacking, and coughing. When the gas cleared, Anko stumbled towards Naruto and took a swing at him. "You damn cough, brat. I'm going to cough, beat the shit out of, achoo you." Naruto dodged her wild swings before grabbing both of her hands and trapping them between both of their bodies in a hug. "What are you doing, cough, brat?" Anko questioned while trying to focus on him. "Just showing you another technique I came up with, Anko-sensei," Naruto answered before capturing her lips in a kiss. "The brat's actually kissing me. Why am I getting so drowsy?" was the last thought she had before falling unconscious. "I call that my Kurohormu Seppon 4, Anko-sensei," Naruto said as he set her down against a tree and began removing the poisons from her body with a chakra-covered hand. "Oh, what the hell hit me?" Anko mentally questioned as she regained consciousness. "Oh yeah, that brat gassed me, and when I tried to kick his ass he kissed me," she thought before bringing her hand to her lips and blushing. "Are you alright, Anko-sensei?" she heard a familiar voice ask. Quickly snapping her eyes open, she had Naruto pinned against the tree with a kunai to his throat. "Yeah, brat, I'm just fine," she said with a smirk as she saw him pale and begin to sweat. "Now, is that all the jutsu you have created with your bloodline?" she asked him flatly. "Yeah, that's all of them so far. The other few I have are still in the planning stages," he stuttered out as she began to lower her kunai. "I see," Anko said while she lowered the kunai all the way down to his crotch. "Anko-sensei, what are you doing?" Naruto questioned nervously as he tried to back away. "Oh, nothing. But I'd like to know what you plan to do now that you've stolen a kiss from me. I expect some kind of compensation," she said with a smirk as she pressed the kunai closer to his crotch. "What do you want?" "I'll do anything if you'll promise not to use that kunai right now," Naruto said as he looked down at the blade she had pressed to his crotch. I think a date is in order. You'll take me somewhere nice and treat me to dinner. Then you'll pay for the meal and walk me home like a gentleman. Yes, I think that'll just about make up for you stealing that kiss from me. Anko stated with a devious grin on her face. Sure, Anko-sensei. I'd be more than happy to do that for you. Naruto replied as he gave her his best smile. Well, his best smile, while she had a sharp kunai pressed against his crotch anyway. I expected no less than that from you. She replied with a grin as she put her kunai away. Now I want to see how far you've come with your summoning jutsu. Anko told him as she pushed him back towards the center of the clearing. Yes, Anko-sensei. Naruto responded as he thought back to the day he'd gotten approval to summon the Rat Clan. Flashback the day after Naruto met the Rat Summon. Naruto and Anko had just completed another day's worth of drank missions and were heading to the training grounds to get in some afternoon training. Once they'd gotten to the training ground they planned on using, they started a light warm-up before getting to the serious training. Suddenly, a puff of ninja smoke appeared in the middle of the clearing. Both Anko and Naruto were instantly on guard in case it was some kind of attack. To both of their surprise, the rat that had taken a nap in Naruto's hair the day before was sitting on top of the largest rat both of them had ever seen. Hey, Poison Man, how are you doing today? The small rat asked with a wave. Oh, it's just you. Anko said dismissively as she put her kunai away. Hey, what do you mean, just me? That's not nice, Snake Lady. The small rat whined as he pouted on top of the large rat's head. Hush now, Soki. We are here to present your poison friend with the contract per boss's orders. The large rat stated. Not that I'm unhappy about receiving a summoning contract or anything, but could you tell me why a rat that's almost as big as a horse is needed to allow me to sign it? Naruto asked as he stared at the giant rat. I'm the keeper of the contract, human. The large rat responded before lifting its head and showing them the scroll that was hanging from its neck like a necklace. The large rat removed the scroll from its neck before laying it on the ground and unrolling it. Naruto looked at the scroll and noticed that there had only been 5 previous contract holders, and all of their names were black, meaning they had died. When was the last time the Rat Clan had a human contract holder? Anko asked curiously as she peered over Naruto's shoulder. About 130 years ago. He died in the massive wars that ravaged the lands at the time, before the hidden villages brought a measure of order to the chaos of the land. The large rat answered as he showed Naruto how to sign the contract. After signing the contract in blood and leaving his right hand print on the scroll, the large rat rolled up the scroll and nodded to Naruto before disappearing in another puff of ninja smoke. So, your name is Naruto, right, Poison Man? Soki, the small rat, asked him as he sat before Naruto and looked him over. Yeah, that's me, Uzumaki Naruto, at your service. Naruto replied with a grin as he held out his hand and let Soki climb up to his shoulder. Well, Naruto, my name is Soki. I'll be your main partner for the Rat Clan. Feel free to call on me whenever you need my abilities. Soki responded as he scratched behind his ear with his back paw. What kind of abilities does the Rat Clan possess? Anko asked as she watched Naruto and Soki interact. Oh, we can do lots of things. Soki stated before hopping off Naruto's shoulder and landing on top of a training post nearby. For example, rats about my size are good for infiltration and subtle attacks, while larger rats, like the one I came with, are excellent frontline fighters. Other rats are gigantic and can smash through whole enemy encampments and fortresses. And our boss, while he's about the size of a bijou, he can take on entire armies of humans or several battalions of ninja. Soki explained as he looked at both Anko and Naruto. I see. So what should I do with the contract now that I've signed it? Naruto questioned as he looked between Anko and Soki. You need to train in summoning jutsu, brat. Once you're able to summon the boss, you'll need to work on summoning specific members of the clan. Some contracts even allow you to summon multiple members of the clan at one time. Anko explained as she looked to Soki for confirmation. Snake Lady is right, Naruto. Soki confirmed. Our contract can summon entire hordes of rats in one summoning. But you can't fully use the contract without the boss's approval. The only way to get the boss's approval, though, is to summon him and pass whatever test he decides to give you. Naruto nodded in understanding before asking if he should try to summon the boss. Not a good idea, brat. If you summon a boss animal this close to the residential area of the village, you'll cause a massive panic amongst the civilians, Not to mention that every ninja in the village would quickly surround the area and seal it off with multiple forms of barrier jutsu. Anko cautioned as Naruto quickly separated his hands from each other. Not to mention the fact that most people don't know about my clan's summoning contract. They might think they're being attacked by a bijou if the boss suddenly appeared in the middle of your village. Soki replied as he sat on the training post. Alright, so no summoning near the residential area of the village. Got it, Naruto said as he stood beside Anko. Well, I'd suggest summoning the boss soon. He doesn't like to be kept waiting, Soki told him while lying down on top of the training post. Alright then, Brat, we're going to see the Hokage about your new summoning contract. I'm sure he'll give you authorization to summon the rat boss once he designates a proper area for it, Anko stated as she started towards the Hokage tower. Hop on, Soki, Naruto said as his new rat summon jumped onto his shoulder before Naruto followed after Anko. After getting to the Hokage tower and making their way up to the Hokage's office, the trio were ushered into the office where Sarutobi was meeting with Koharu and Hamura. Anko and Naruto, what is it can I do for you today? I'm afraid you'll have to make it quick though, as I'm currently in a meeting, Sarutobi said as he gestured to his former teammates. Hokage-sama, my apprentice recently came into possession of a summoning contract for the Rat Clan, and I've come to you seeking authorization to use one of the large training grounds as the area for his first attempt to summon the contract's boss rat, Anko stated with a bow towards the aged leader. Is this true, Naruto? Hamura asked the boy with a speculative look. Yes, it is, Counselor Mitokado. I now hold the contract for the Rat Clan, but I need to summon the boss before I can fully utilize the contract, Naruto replied while scratching Soki behind the ears. Is that a member of your new contract, Naruto? Koharu questioned as she looked at the rat. Yes, he is Counselor Udatane. His name is Soki, he answered as he set Soki on the Hokage's desk for the three elder ninja to examine. Hey, how are you old people doing? Soki questioned the Hokage and his two advisors. Naruto and Anko both face-palmed at the rat's disrespectful greeting. Not much for respect, are you? The Sandaime asked as he looked at the rat. Nah, not really, Soki replied before scratching his neck with his back paw. Well, I'm sure we can get an area set up for you to try your hand at summoning Naruto. Just give me an hour or two, and we'll let you know where you can begin your attempts, Sarutobi told him as Anko and Naruto both bowed respectfully to their leader before leaving the office to grab lunch together. 2 hours later, Naruto and Anko were standing on a cliff overlooking a large forested valley that was several square miles in size. I believe this training ground will suit your summoning needs, Naruto, Sarutobi stated as he, Koharu, and Hamura walked up to the sensei and apprentice duo. Yeah, the boss should be more than capable of moving around here. That's already a plus for you, Poison Man, Soki remarked from atop Naruto's head. Alright, brat, go down there and summon the boss so we can start missions again, Anko said with a smirk as she shoved Naruto over the cliff and down towards the training ground. Yes, Anko-sensei, Naruto replied as he landed on the ground safely and started tree-hopping towards the large clearing in the center of the area. So what do you believe are the boy's chances of summoning the boss today? Koharu questioned as she looked to her old teammates and Anko. I'd give the boy a 50-50 chance of actually summoning the boss today, Hamura answered as they watched the boy arrive in the center of the valley training ground. I can guarantee the brat will summon the boss on his first attempt, Anko declared with a grin. Care to explain your confidence in Naruto's abilities? Sarutobi asked her while watching the boy go through the hand seals for the summoning jutsu. Just what I've seen him do, not to mention what I've read from his files about his chakra capacity, Anko replied before they all heard the shout of Kuchios no Jutsu and directed their attention to the area where Naruto had just vanished inside a massive cloud of summoning smoke. When the smoke cleared, a rat almost 200 feet tall stood in the center of the training field with a curious look on its face as it took in its new surroundings. The boss rat was covered in dark gray, almost black, fur and had what appeared to be armor covering his back, underbelly, and his forelegs. From under the dull metal armor, dirty cloth bandages could be seen. The rat also had similar bandages wrapped around its head and covering the space between its eyes. Who the hell summoned me? The giant rat boomed out as it observed its surroundings warily. I'll be damned, Hamura breathed out in shock. I told you so, counselor, Anko said with a grin. Saratobi looked on fondly as he watched his surrogate grandson try to get the boss rat's attention. The boy is truly impressive, Koharu stated as she too watched on as Naruto finally seemed to get the rat's attention. I summoned you, boss, Naruto said as the rat tried to look up at the small human on top of its head. Come down onto my snout, little one, the rat boss ordered with a twitch of its nose. Sure thing, boss, Naruto replied before leaping down onto the rat's snout. So you summoned me, human? The boss asked as he stared down at Naruto. Yes, I did. I'm hoping to gain your approval to summon your clan, Naruto answered with a bow of respect to the great beast before him. Your manners are excellent, boy. Let's check your scent to see what you're truly like, the giant rat said as he inhaled Naruto's scent and closed his eyes briefly. You smell of various poisons, sweat, the forest, and if I'm not mistaken, multiple flavors of ramen, the rat boss said as he opened his eyes again. Wow, Naruto stated with shock. You can tell all that with just a sniff? The rat boss gave a slight nod, so as not to displace Naruto, before replying. Yes, and your scent and the smells that come from you tell me much more about you. For example, the fact that you smell so heavily of sweat and the forest tells me you spend most of your time training, while the smell of poisons tells me what kind of weapons and techniques you specialize in. The ramen, however, I can only guess that it's your favorite food, the rat boss said while Naruto just nodded in amazement at the rat's sharp nose. So, boss, what test are you going to give me so I can gain your approval? Naruto asked as he stared into the rat boss's eyes eagerly. Well, you've already passed 3 of my normal requirements. The first being that you summon me in an area I'd be comfortable in. This valley provides me ample space to move around and is full of wonderful scenery. The second requirement was your manners upon summoning me. Showing respect to me by bowing when we met proved that you're respectful when you need to be. The third requirement was your scent. The smells that prove you train day after day for hours on end allows me to know that my contract holder is strong enough to show the true strength of my clan. In truth, you've only one more requirement to meet before I give you my approval, the boss rat explained to the now grinning Naruto. What is it? I'll do my best to pass, boss, he stated as he practically shook in anticipation. Bring me a bottle of sake that's big enough to sate a being of my size, the rat boss said as Naruto and all the other humans watching face faulted. Are you serious, boss? Naruto questioned as he rubbed the back of his head. Of course, my final requirement is that you know how to properly reward a member of my clan for a job well done, the boss rat replied as he stared at the genin. Well, I guess that makes sense, Naruto said before looking back towards the boss. I'll be back in about an hour, boss. Can you wait that long? The rat boss simply lowered himself down until he was lying on the ground before replying. Sure thing. I'll enjoy the scenery and maybe get in a bit of a nap. By the way, child, my name is Soikuja. I'm Sokiken's father. Naruto quickly reached into his hair and pulled Soki out. You're this guy's father? He asked, surprised. Hey, old man, Soki said with a wave to his father. I expect you to assist young Naruto in his last test, Soki, Soikuja told his son with a pointed look. No problem, Dad, Soki replied with a grin. With that, both Naruto and Soki ran back to Enko, Saratobi, Hamura, and Koharu. After telling them his plan to get the acceptable amount of sake and getting a loan from the Hokage, Naruto quickly ran to the sake brewery near the edge of the village. After telling them he wanted to buy 100 gallons of sake and showing them the money the Hokage loaned him, the brewmaster was more than happy to lead him to a tank containing 100 gallons of sake that was about to be bottled and distributed to various parts of the village. Naruto quickly paid the brewmaster before using a sealing scroll and sealing all 100 gallons inside. After thanking the brewmaster for the sake, Naruto and Soki headed back to the training ground to find that Saratobi had come through on his end of the bargain and used one of the Doton jutsu he'd mastered over his many years as a shinobi to create a giant sake bottle out of clay. After unsealing the sake and letting it fill the newly created bottle, Soki jumped onto his father's nose and woke him up. I see you've gotten the sake. You've even had a bottle made for me. I must admit I'm impressed, Soikuja said as he picked up the massive bottle and took several sips. Not bad at all. All right, Naruto. You've met all my expectations, so I grant you full use of the Rat Clan's summoning contract. With that statement, both Soikuja and the giant sake bottle disappeared in a giant poof of ninja smoke. End flashback. After that day, Naruto had practiced his summoning jutsu several days out of every week. Kuchios no jutsu, he called out as he slammed his hand onto the ground. When the smoke cleared, Soki sat in the training ground and looked up at Naruto. Hey Naruto, how've you been? Soki asked as he climbed up Naruto's outstretched arm. I'm good, Soki, how about you? Naruto replied as he scratched behind Soki's ears and gave him a small bread roll he kept on him for when he had to summon any of the small rats. I'm good, Soki replied as he started nibbling away on the roll. What am I, not here or something? Anko asked as she stared at the rat. Oh, hey Anko, when did you get here? Soki asked with a grin as he kept eating his roll. Yeah, good to see you, to rodent. She replied with a smirk as she looked at Naruto. All right, brat. You seem to be able to control exactly how many rats you summon and how big they are. So how about we get another crank? She asked with a grin. Yes, sure. Sounds like fun, Anko sensei. Naruto replied as Soki climbed into his hair and started dozing. With that, both sensei and student made their way to the Hokage Tower to pick up a new mission. When the duo entered the mission office, they came across Team 7, Team 8, and Team 10 waiting to pick up mission of their own. It seemed, however, that Sasuke was arguing about the mission he had received and was currently holding up the other two teams' attempts to get a mission for themselves. Damn it, I'm an elite Uchiha, and I demand a rank mission. If the Dobe can do one, then it should be easy for a ninja of my caliber. Sasuke yelled at the Chunin that was distributing the missions. To save the Chunin from having to explain why Sasuke couldn't have a rank mission, yet Naruto made himself known by answering for the Chunin. It doesn't matter who you are, Sasuke team. You haven't done enough drank missions to even qualify for a crank, much less a rank. Naruto stated as he and Anko walked towards the desk. That's what I've been trying to tell you for the last few minutes, Sasuke. Kakashi sighed as he partially looked up from his Ika book to admonish Sasuke. You can't talk to Sasuke-kun like that. Both Ino and Sakura yelled at Naruto. Naruto simply started cleaning out his ear with his pinky, trying to get them to stop ringing. Shut your mouths, you wannabe kunoichi. Anko shouted at the two fangirls. Sakura and Ino instantly shrunk back behind their teams to get away from Anko. Sheesh, try and tell some emo Avenger the truth, and you have to deal with his rabid howler monkey fangirls. Naruto sighed as he put his hands back in his pockets. I must admit I was surprised by your completion of a rank mission, Naruto-san. Asuma stated as he exhaled smoke from his cigarette. It was a bit challenging, but with Anko sensei there it wasn't anything to really worry about. Naruto said humbly while rubbing the back of his head sheepishly. From what Anko told me, you're the one who actually took out the entire bandit camp. You even took the head of a Kusagakure missing nin that was leading them, if I heard correctly. Kurenai stated as she looked at the boy with a grin. Come on now, Kurenai-san, you're embarrassing me. Naruto said as he looked at the ground while scratching his right cheek. Besides, he was only a crank missing nin. A rouge chunin that had knowledge of some of Kusagakure's private jutsu. He wasn't really all that strong. All the other genin, besides Sasuke of course, had wide eyes at what they were hearing. But it was because he had said knowledge that Kusagakure has sent you the money to cover that man's bounty, Naruto. Sarutobi stated as everyone turned to look at the desk to see that the Chunin had been relieved by the Hokage himself. Still as sneaky as ever, right Hokage? Naruto remarked as Sarutobi smiled and handed him a scroll with the word bounty written in kanji on it, as well as a letter with Kusagakure's insignia on it. Naruto quickly opened the letter and absent-mindedly started reading it out loud. Letter from Kusagakure. Dear Uzumaki Naruto, we in Kusa would like to thank you for ridding us of one of our more annoying missing nin. Bokusuchi Tanso, the missing nin you eliminated, held knowledge that could have been disastrous in the wrong hands. We as a village commend you for getting rid of him and his traitorous ways. If you would like, feel free to visit Kusagakure no Sato sometime in the future. We would enjoy meeting the man who helped our village maintain its secrecy. Enclosed in the scroll, which should be with this letter, is Tansu's bounty. His head was worth approximately 250,000 ryo, and it is all there for you to do with as you please. In the future, please feel free to take out any and all Kusa missing nin you come across. You will be given their bounties and free reign to any weapons they have on them. We hope to see more impressive feats from you in the future, young Uzumaki. Sincerely, Tahata Saishu, leader of Kusagakure. End letter. Holy crap, Naruto just got a major payday. Kiba shouted as Naruto looked up from the scroll. I read out loud, didn't I? He asked as Anko nodded with a grin on her face. Very impressive, Naruto-san. Shino complimented from beside his sensei. Yeah, way to go, Naruto. Chuji said with a grin as he reached for more chips. You're so troublesome. Shikamaru stated with a sigh as he looked around bored. Good job, Naruto-kun. Hinata stuttered out while poking her fingers together. Thanks, you guys. Looks like I can pay back that loan now, right, Hokugiji? Naruto replied with a grin as he stowed away both the letter and the scroll. Yes, it does, Naruto, but we can deal with that at a later time. Now, on to the reason everyone is here. Sarutobi stated as he exhaled smoke from his pipe and picked out several mission scrolls. Team 7 will receive a drink, he stated as he handed Kakashi a mission scroll with a large D on it. Thank you, Hokage-sama. Kakashi said with a bow before ushering his team out the door. Team 8 has requested 2 drank missions for today, Sarutobi said as he handed Kurenai 2 mission scrolls. Thank you, Hokage-sama. Kurenai said with a bow as she and her team left the mission office. Finally, Team 10 has a drank mission as well, he said as he gave Asuma a mission scroll. Thanks, Pops. Asuma said with a slight bow as he led his team away. Now Naruto and Anko, I assume you two would like a crank, correct? Sarutobi asked while thumbing through the mission scrolls. Yes, sir, Hokage-sama. Anko stated with a smile as she gave a slight bow. I'm glad those two seem to be getting along so well, Sarutobi thought with a smile while looking through the missions he had available. Very well, I believe this mission will suit the two of you quite well. You'll be going to Himori village west of Konoha. It seems their police force is having some trouble getting rid of a local gang of thugs that have been plaguing the villagers. The police want the gang brought in alive so that they can be arrested and properly sentenced to imprisonment, Sarutobi explained while handing the scroll to Anko. Mission accepted, Hokage-sama. My apprentice and I will be back within a week. With that said, both Naruto and Anko bowed to the Sandaime and left the office. Time skip 1 day later. After tree hopping for several hours and making camp for the night, which involved Anko teasing Naruto with a brief glimpse at her breasts inside the tent they shared, the two had made it to Himori the next morning. After meeting with both the village elder and the police chief and getting what info they could on the gang, which mainly involved the fact that the gang members seemingly disappeared when they were about to be caught, Anko and Naruto set out to complete their mission. It seems to me that these thugs have some way of escaping from the police that doesn't involve just running and hoping to get away. It wouldn't be wise to try and chase them all over town if we could just find their hiding place and flood the little punks with police officers, Anko mused as she and Naruto sat on top of the roof of the police station. Actually, I think I know a way we could do that, Naruto replied with a grin as he jumped off the roof and landed in the alleyway below. Anko quickly followed after him before he could get too far. So what's your big plan, brat? Anko asked as she and Naruto stood in an alley shielded from the view of the passing villagers. Well, I was thinking, wouldn't it be possible for these thugs to use the city's sewers as an escape route? I mean, every manhole leads to another one somewhere else. So if we could track one of them through the sewers, when they try and outrun the police sometime tonight, we could find their hideout and shut them inside with one of your Doton Jutsu, Naruto explained as he went through several hand seals. I see what you mean. Civilians rarely think about looking down when they're chasing someone. If these punks had the manholes set up beforehand, they could slip down them and cover them back up before the police noticed. Anko nodded in approval as she watched her apprentice finish his hand seals. Too bad for these thugs, I have the ultimate sewer dwellers on our side. Kuchios no Jutsu, Naruto said with a smirk as almost 100 average-sized rats appeared out of the cloud of ninja smoke. What do you need, Naruto? Soki asked from in front of the horde of rats. I need you guys to patrol the sewer systems around here and follow anyone that's using them. When you find out where they're going with them, come back and report to me or Anko, he said as all the rats, except Soki, saluted before scurrying down the currently open manhole between Naruto and Anko's feet. Now we just have to sit back and wait, right, brat? Anko asked with a grin while Naruto nodded. Yep, Soki and the others will know the entire layout of this sewer system in roughly an hour or so, and the thugs don't usually cause trouble until about an hour after sundown, which, by my estimation, isn't for another 3 hours. So I say we just hang out in the restaurant outside this alley until one of my furry friends reports in. he stated before walking out of the alley with Anko by his side. Sounds like a plan, Brat. Besides, a good meal sounds nice right about now. She replied as they both entered the restaurant to get some food. Almost 3.5 hours later, Soki climbed into Naruto's lap under the table he and Anko were sharing and whispered to him. Naruto, we found a guy running through the sewers a few minutes ago. He left the sewers and entered a house near the outskirts of the village. I'll show you where he is. From the sounds of it, there are a lot of other people in the house as well. Soki reported as Naruto smiled before slipping Soki a large roll with a slice of cheese between the two halves Naruto had cut it in. Excellent work, Soki. Tell the others that they can assemble back in the alleyway for their reward. Naruto whispered as he felt Soki hop off his lap before he stood up and told Anko to follow Soki. After several minutes of roof hopping, the two ninja found the house Soki and the other rats had designated as the thugs' hideout. So this is where the little punks are hiding? Anko asked with a raised eyebrow. Yep, about 70 people are currently inside from what the others have told me. Soki responded while finishing off his cheese roll. Well, I leave the entrapment up to you, Anko-sensei. Naruto said with an exaggerated bow. Humph, flattery will get you nowhere, Brat. She responded before she leapt down to the street and went through several hand seals. Doton, Kabamatsu no Jutsu. 5. Anko whispered before putting her hands on the ground. Suddenly, the ground around the house rose up into a hollow cylinder almost 40 feet high and 2 feet thick. The surprised shouts from the now trapped group of thugs filled the air as they tried in vain to find a way out of the giant earthen structure they found themselves in. Well, that takes care of them, Anko said with a smirk as Naruto landed beside her. Now we just wait for the police to arrive, he said with a smile as he stood beside her. It only took the entire police force a few minutes to assemble around the large earthen tower that had suddenly appeared on the outskirts of their village. When they got there, Anko was quick to explain the situation. After the police were up to date on the situation, they quickly surrounded the area. Anko told them she was going to make a hole in and prepared to arrest the thugs that had been giving their village such a hard time. When Anko made the doorway, several thugs predictably ran straight out. The police had no trouble catching them and starting the arrests. Several thugs tried to resist, which made both Anko and Naruto smile, but were quickly subdued when the policemen pulled out their standard-issue jutty and hit them in the back of the head with the bottom of the handle. Shortly after, both Anko and Naruto were getting their mission scroll signed and started their way back to Konoha. They had spent a total of 3 days in Himori village and were both glad that they were ahead of schedule. After setting up for another night of camping, and Anko teased Naruto again, this time by giving him a brief view of her ass with nothing but her fishneta panties on, they both settled down to sleep. The next morning, both Anko and Naruto broke camp and made it back to Konoha. After turning in their mission scroll and collecting their share of the payment, they both left the mission office. So, Brat, how about you take me on that date you owe me tomorrow night? Anko asked with a slight blush as she walked beside Naruto. Sure, Anko-sensei. I'd love to. Naruto answered nervously with his whole face red. Sounds like a plan to me. Pick me up at 7 and find a nice place for dinner, all right? She asked with a smile and a light blush on her cheeks. Of course, Anko-sensei. I'll make this date as enjoyable as possible for you, he replied with a nervous chuckle. Then I'll see you tomorrow night, my little stud, she whispered into his ear seductively. Naruto's response was to have a dark red blush, babble like an idiot, and finally have to pinch his nose to prevent himself from passing out from a nosebleed. Anko watched all this before bursting out laughing and walking away to tell her friends about her date tomorrow night. She's going to be the death of me one day, I'm sure of it, Naruto thought as he made his way home to plan out his date for tomorrow night. Chapter 5: Dates, Teaching, and Reinforcement. Naruto was incredibly nervous. He had spent his entire day planning out every aspect of his date tonight. He had woken up at 7 in the morning and gone through his morning rituals before getting dressed and heading out into the village to prepare for the date he had with Anko. After several hours of searching, he found a restaurant with a menu that would suit both Anko's tastes and his own. He quickly made reservations for 2 at 7 that night before going to a tailor shop in the merchant section of the village. Naruto spent several minutes getting his measurements taken for his new dress clothes and paid the tailor with some of the leftover bounty money to have them ready by 6 o'clock that night. At exactly 6, Naruto picked up his new dress clothes and dashed back to his apartment to shower and change. Now he stood before his only full-length mirror, smoothing out the sleeves and trying to calm himself down. Okay, I can do this. It's just a date. Just a date with my beautiful sensei that takes every opportunity to tease me with her body and could take me out in an instant if I piss her off. Naruto said to himself with a sigh as he left his apartment and headed for Anko's place. It wasn't long before Naruto found himself standing in front of Anko's door, and he had to swallow the lump in his throat. Okay, just keep it together, show Anko a good time tonight, be a gentleman, and make it back. That's all there is to this. Okay, here we go, he thought before knocking on her door. A few seconds later, Anko opened her door and Naruto's mind went blank. Standing before him in a dark lavender dress that went down to just above her knees and showed off a bit of cleavage, while accentuating her curves, while her hair was let down and wearing black heels, stood his sensei, with a smile on her face as she gauged his reaction. Brat doesn't look too bad himself, Anko commented mentally as her eyes roamed over Naruto's attire. Naruto stood before her wearing a white undershirt with a dark green haori over it. His pants were also a dark green and stopped a few inches above his ankles. He had a dark purple obi tied around his waist, and there were several orange diamond shapes on the bottom of the haori near the hem. Do you like what you see, Brat? Anko asked with a teasing grin as Naruto finally shook himself out of his stupor. He quickly smiled back at her while rubbing the back of his head before replying. Yes, Anko-sensei, I think you look very beautiful, Naruto complimented while Anko's cheeks reddened in a blush. Shall we go now, sensei? I made reservations for 7, and we have enough time to enjoy a leisurely stroll to the restaurant before we get there, he said with a grin as he offered his arm to her. That sounds nice, Brat, Anko replied after she'd gotten her blush under control. With that, she looped her arm with his, and they set off for the restaurant. Once they had arrived in front of the restaurant, Anko broke out into a grin. The Yuin Shikuji, huh? You sure know how to spoil a girl, don't you, Brat? She said with a grin as Naruto opened the door to the 4-star restaurant for her. Quite the gentleman as well. I'm seriously going to make you my husband if you keep this up, Brat, Anko thought with a grin. Only the best for you, Anko-sensei, Naruto replied with a gentle smile. As Anko walked into the restaurant, he quickly followed after her as they made their way to the host's podium. Good evening, sir and madam. Welcome to Yuin Shikuji. Do you have a reservation? The host asked with a professional air as he opened his reservations book. Yes, sir, we do. A table for 2 under Uzumaki, Naruto answered as the host looked down at his book for confirmation. Yes, it's right here. Table for 2 at 7. Please follow me, and I'll show you to your table, the host stated as he led them through the beautifully decorated restaurant and towards their table. After going up a flight of stairs to the upper level and being led across the elegant floor, they finally arrived at their table. Here you are, sir, the host said as he stopped at a table by the windows. Please enjoy your evening with us and have a wonderful meal, the host stated before walking back the way they'd come. Very nice, so far, Anko said with a smile as Naruto pulled her chair out for her. And you just keep on impressing me, Mr. Gentleman, she stated with a grin as she sat down and let Naruto push her chair closer to the table. I aim to please, Anko-sensei, Naruto replied as he seated himself and began perusing the menu. Shortly after they began to look through their menus, a server came up to their table and asked them what they'd like to drink. Ladies first, Anko-sensei, Naruto said with a grin. I'll have some of your Hagurito sake, please, Anko told the server, who nodded while writing it down and then turning towards Naruto for his drink order. I'll have some Gyokuro tea, sir, Naruto said while the server nodded as he wrote down Naruto's order. After the server left to get their drinks, both Anko and Naruto continued looking through their menus for a dish that appealed to them. The server returned with their drinks a minute later and asked them what they'd like to have for the evening. I'll have your beef kushiyaki with a side of fried rice, if you would, Anko stated as the server nodded and complimented her on her choice. He then turned to Naruto and asked for his order. I'd like your motoyaki shrimp meal, sir, Naruto said as the server once again nodded and complimented his choice. After the server took their orders to the kitchen, the two made light small talk and traded humorous tales about their past experiences that had both of them cracking up by the time their food arrived. As their meals were placed in front of them, Naruto and Anko couldn't help but to breathe in the delectable aromas the food produced. After thanking the server and being left to their meals, Naruto and Anko quickly began devouring their food as quickly as possible while still maintaining their manners. When the two had finished, the server returned to take their used dishware back to the kitchen and asked them if they'd like any dessert. "If you want something, feel free to order it, Anko-sensei," Naruto told her with a smile as she quickly looked through the dessert menu. After several seconds, Anko had decided what she wanted and looked towards the server. "I'd like an order of your chichi dango, please," Anko ordered as the server nodded his head before taking their used dishware back to the kitchen to be washed. Anko sighed happily as she looked over at her date with a smile. "You've completely blown away all my expectations, brat," she said as Naruto smiled at her. "I'm glad you're enjoying yourself, Anko-sensei," Naruto replied as he sipped his tea. Shortly after that, the server returned with Anko's dessert and refilled both Anko's sake and Naruto's tea. Once he'd left, Anko picked out one of the dumplings and put it in her mouth to eat. "Oh yes, that's dango perfection," Anko sighed contentedly as she took another dumpling off the plate. "Here, brat, try one," she said as Naruto reached out to take it. Anko moved it away. "Nope, you just open up, brat," she stated with a devious grin as Naruto's eyes widened. "Are you sure, Anko-sensei?" Naruto asked, shocked at what she was hinting at. When she nodded, Naruto simply complied and opened his mouth and let Anko feed him the dumpling. You're right, Anko-sensei. These are good," he said with a smile as the sweet dumpling assaulted his taste buds with flavor. "Told you, brat. Now it's your turn," Anko replied with a seductive smirk as Naruto blushed before picking up a dumpling and holding it in front of Anko's mouth. With a wink at Naruto, she opened her mouth and ran her tongue over the dumpling before taking the bit-sized sweet into her mouth and chewing it with a grin. At this point, Naruto had a heavy blush on his face at his sensei's rather suggestive way of eating and was close to a nosebleed like never before. This continued on until they had finished the dessert entirely, at which point the server returned with their check and thanked them for their business. "A good meal, if I do say so myself," Naruto said with a grin as Anko nodded. Naruto quickly paid the bill and left a nice tip for the server before pulling Anko's chair back and helping her up. "Shall we go, Anko-sensei?" he asked as he offered her his arm, which she took with a grin. As they left the restaurant and headed back towards Anko's apartment, they both talked quietly about various topics while they strolled down the street arm in arm. When they stopped in front of Anko's door, she turned towards him and thanked him for the evening. "Thank you for this wonderful date tonight," Anko said with a smile as Naruto smiled back. "I don't think I've ever been treated as well or spoiled as much as you did for me tonight," she said with a grin as he rubbed the back of his head with a grin. "You don't have to thank me, Anko-sensei. It was my pleasure. I really enjoyed tonight too," Naruto replied as he smiled. Before he saw it coming, Anko had captured his lips in a gentle kiss. After realizing what was happening, Naruto slowly closed his eyes and enjoyed the kiss the two were now sharing. When Anko pulled away, Naruto slowly opened his eyes before a small, contented smile appeared on his face. "That was nice," he said with a happy sigh. "I'm glad you liked it." Anko giggled as she looked at Naruto's dazed expression. "Maybe I should let you have one more for being such a gentleman tonight," she asked in a teasing tone before giggling again when Naruto began to nod his head with a silly grin on his face. "All right, I guess I wouldn't mind," she said playfully before their lips met again in a gentle kiss. Shortly after the kiss began, Naruto felt Anko's tongue at his lips and instinctively opened his mouth to deepen the kiss. After several seconds, the two broke apart for air. With a content smile on both of their faces, the two embraced and simply held each other for a moment. "Have a good night, Naruto-kun," Anko whispered to him with a smile. "You too, Anko-kan," Naruto said quietly as they separated from each other's embrace. "You know, I think this is the first time you've called me by my name," he said with a grin as Anko smiled at him. "I think you've more than proven to me that you're not a brat," Anko said with a wink as she gave him a chaste kiss on the cheek. "Good night, Naruto-kun," she said as she entered her apartment. "Good night, Anko-kan. Sweet dreams," Naruto replied before he began to walk back to his place in a happy daze. Anko watched him walk away with a smile before closing her door and heading to bed. Time skipped the next morning. Naruto awoke with a smile still plastered to his face as he recalled his successful date last night. I'm glad that worked out. I think me and Ankakan could really have a future together, he thought with a happy sigh as he went through his morning ritual. Once he was finished, he left his apartment and headed towards the training grounds that he and Anko regularly used. When he arrived, Anko was already there and sitting on a tree branch watching him. She looks as beautiful as ever, Naruto thought as he waved to her. Good morning, Naruto. Sleep well? Anko asked with a grin that told him she already knew the answer. He also thought it made her look sexy, but she had enough tricks to use on him already, and he didn't think she needed any more. Best sleep I've had so far, Anko-sensei, Naruto replied as he stood beside the tree she was sitting in. With a smile, Anko jumped down beside him and told him their plans for the day. All right, Naruto. Today I'm going to teach you some taijutsu to help polish up your overall form. You're proficient in the art, but I want you to have the basis of a few different styles that you can use or fall back on if you need to. Anko explained while Naruto nodded and followed her as they moved towards the center of the clearing. Today I'll show you the basis of 3 different taijutsu styles, and we'll practice them every day until you're proficient in their combat application, she said as they stopped in the center of the clearing. The 3 styles you'll be learning from me are called Hebidaijiki Ryu 1, Tetsugoi Ryu 2, and Reikamurai Ryu 3. Once you become proficient in these 3 styles and are able to transition between them in the heat of battle, you'll be almost unbeatable in terms of taijutsu. However, learning these styles to that degree can take several months, and to actually master them takes many years longer than that. So for now, we'll just get you up to proficiency, Anko explained as she took the first stance and Naruto began mimicking her stances and movement. Time skip 3 months later. Naruto woke up at his usual time of 7 in the morning. After the last 3 months of Anko drilling 3 taijutsu styles into his head and kicking the crap out of him during their taijutsu spars, Naruto had reached proficiency in all 3 styles. Between the constant training and missions for the village, Naruto and Anko had gone on several dates over the last 3 months, and the two were closer to each other now than ever before. To say Naruto was happy was an understatement. He had a sensei that was devoted to making him stronger, and a loving girlfriend that had promised him a wild first time once he turned 13. Just thinking of that certain promise of Anko's had Naruto blushing up a storm. After locking his door and heading to the training grounds to meet Anko, Naruto began to wonder what kind of mission they'd get today. Anko was currently waiting for her boyfriend/apprentice to meet her at their usual training grounds so they could head to the missions office to get another crank mission. She was actually contemplating requesting a brank mission just to see how far Naruto had come since his last brank, not to mention the fact that she loved to watch him fight strong opponents. It gave her a sense of pride to see her apprentice/boyfriend use the skills she'd taught him to complete their missions. She'd also started counting down the weeks until his 13th birthday, when he became a legal adult in the eyes of the village's laws. She'd already promised him a wild night, and she couldn't help but to be slightly impatient for it. After all, if things went according to the plans she'd made, Naruto would be able to claim clan head status soon after he passed the Chunin selection exams, and she'd get to marry the man she loved and have a child with him all in a relatively short amount of time after his birthday. Those thoughts alone made Anko want to drag Naruto to her house, throw him onto her bed, and have her way with him until she was sure they were parents. Good morning, Anko-sensei, Naruto called, breaking Anko from her love-filled lusty thoughts. She quickly looked up at him with a bright smile and waved at him from across the clearing. Morning, Naruto. Are you ready for another mission? Anko asked as they met in the middle of the clearing. Yes, Anko-sensei, I believe I am, Naruto said while he smiled at her. I'm also ready for another date with you, he remarked as she blushed before playfully pushing his shoulder. We had a date 3 nights ago. Are you already missing my loving company? Anko asked with a smirk as she gave him a little pose and a sexy look with her eyes half-lidded. I miss your company as soon as we separate each day, Naruto replied with a grin as he rubbed his neck. You're what makes me keep going after all, he said playfully when she blushed. Deciding to get him back for making her blush, Anko came up with a devious plan. Then I suppose this will keep you going all day, right? She said as she quickly pulled her trench coat completely open, showing him her fishnet-clad breasts for a full 3 seconds before covering them again.